Thank you, Nick. Can I get a roll call, please?
Absolutely. All right, Director Engfer,
Present.
Director Koenig,
Present.
Director McPherson,
Yeah.
Director Cassidy,
Present.
Director Pollock,
Here.
Director Dillis,
Here.
Director Mayhood,
Here.
Director Smoley.
He's there, but he
Welcome back
doesn't
to
hear.
it. All right, looks like we'll come back to him here. Director Stiles,
Present.
Director Perry.
Here.
For alternates only, Director Baskin, Director Brown, Director Koopman.
Here.
And I understand tonight, sir, you are going to be acting as the primary.
Correct.
Director Hayes, Director Lind, Director Henry, Director Eckwall. Now, I know that there were going to be a couple of folks calling in via telephone tonight due to the current weather. Second here, I'm going to check the phones. And okay, if you're calling in via telephone and you're on the board of directors, if you could kindly state your presence.
Lois Henry here.
All righty, thank you, Lois. I got you. Anybody else on the board of directors?
Nick, Mark Small is going to use the phone too. He's switching over now, dialing in, so maybe just give him a few seconds.
Of course.
I think I can probably ask if there are any additions or deletions to the agenda.
Nothing for the agenda, but just for general information, we did receive a resignation letter from Director Franklin, and it came after the board packet has gone out. So we will be doing a formal handover to the alternate in February meeting. But today, Director Koopman is eligible to step in as the voting member because Director Franklin is not here. There's just additional step that the board of directors needs to formally appoint him, and we cannot do that at this meeting.
Okie dokie. How we doing, Mark? Are you with us? Yes, thumbs up. All right. Great. Welcome aboard. So now we have 1.3 oral communications on matters not on the agenda. So this is a chance for anyone in the public, or I guess anybody, to speak about an item that we are not agendized tonight.
And
Anyone on the phones besides Lois, Nick?
looks like we have a comment from Director Koopman. Let me check the phones right quick. If you're a member of the public calling in via telephone and you have a public comment to make for item 1.3 oral communications, you have been unmuted. Please, if you could kindly state your name for speaking. Hearing none, seeing none, deferring to you, Chair Perry.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Angela Franklin for all of her several years of service on this board and on the other boards that she served in Scotts Valley as a public servant. So it's very good of her, and we appreciate her service.
All right, I echoed that. Okay, hearing nothing else, I am going to acknowledge the new members. And now, even though not officially, Jeff is going to be a new member. And we have Manu Koenig, sorry. And it's Manu, not Manu, right?
Manu.
What is Manu? See, I asked my wife before. Well, you're my supervisor, so nice to meet you.
It's my honor. Thank you.
Okay. And Mark Smoley and Gelmo, who is new but not new to this meeting. So I'll talk a little bit more about the new members and ways we're going to try to get you guys on board. You know, it's hard to do it at these meetings to look back and cover things we've done already, but we have some ideas of how we can do that without, in a future meeting, without upsetting our timeline of getting this heavy bit of work done. So I'll talk about that more during director's report. So with that, we'll move on to the general information session. I'm going to hand it over to Dave Sepos, our facilitator, and he'll take it from there.
Okay, good evening to everybody. Nice to yet again virtually see you all again, and hopefully someday in the not too distant future we will be able to be other than virtual. So let me go ahead and draw our attention to again the agenda for today. And first we're going to go ahead and go through the roadmap as we oftentimes do, just to orient ourselves to where things are at. And as a reminder, the clock is ticking, and you're going to hear that numerous times tonight, I'm sure. It is important to remember that while the GSP is due to the Department of Water Resources a year from now, by virtue of public review periods and the necessary review periods of respective agency organizations, we're really talking pencils down, so to speak, significantly earlier than that. So we're going to go through the roadmap, and then in a minute, then we're going to move on from there. And Georgina is going to take over on two really key presentations. One is going to be the continuation and sort of the next steps of the draft problem statement conversation that began on the workshop in December. And then after that is going to be a discussion about model scenarios for potential projects with a particular focus on the climate change scenarios that have been used. I want to stress, as a matter of practice and principle for this, that in particular with regards to item A, 2.1.2a, that notwithstanding that we know that we have new members on the board, nonetheless, all of these meetings, and as a standard practice, we start from where we are and we continue on the conversation, not going backwards. So I'll get to more of that in more detail, but I just do, you know, it is my responsibility to put the sort of the target of maintaining the conversation on a going forward basis, and what Georgina needs to keep the ball rolling, and not reworking or revisiting of things that were memorialized so effectively by Sierra in December. So with that, Georgina and I think Sarah, do you guys want to go ahead and go through the roadmap, and then we'll move on?
I want to just interrupt them before. I had a request from a board member, and this is something I think does make some sense. If people, as we're doing these long presentations that have things on the screen, if you want to turn your camera off because you're leaning into the screen and looking at it, I had said early on in the meetings that it's nice to see people's faces, but given these long informational presentations, feel comfortable to turn your camera off and get your face close to the screen if you need to. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
If I could make a quick add-on to that, administratively, just from a records keeping standpoint, if you guys decide to leave for any reason, if you could just kindly shoot me an email afterwards telling me the time that you left, I need that for the minutes.
Okay, thank you. So Georgina, Sierra, I'm not sure who is going to be going through the roadmap this evening, and then we'll move on to Georgina's presentations.
Dave, I'll take on the roadmap. Good evening to everyone out there. I hope you're all safe and you had good holidays and however different that was this year compared to other years. But I'm glad to see you all again, and we continue on our journey of developing this GSP. Nick, you can go on to the next slide there. Today, as Dave said, we're looking at the problem statement and the results of modeling. But coming up this is the more important part of this roadmap, is that we need to do some other modeling scenarios, and we only have a few more months after that to get the draft GSP written. So in March, we're going to be looking at hopefully the last sustainability indicator, which is the groundwater and storage sustainability indicator, minimum thresholds for that one, and then also start to look at the measurable objectives and undesirable results that we'd put off until we had results from modeling. But we also want to bring to you the cost-benefit analysis of the different projects. And I think tonight you'll get an idea of the benefits of some of these projects already. But in that next step, where we have an engineering firm, WSC is going to be helping us develop the actual costs that are associated, the very rough costs, obviously, because we don't know too much about those projects, but to give you some idea of the cost benefit there. So that's what's coming up in the next 2 months after this meeting. Okay. Nick, you can make me presenter now.
So as we're switching over as presenter, let me just cover a couple of general facilitation items as a reminder, both for our new board members, welcome, and for members of the public, as I believe we think we have a few. As facilitator, my job as a neutral is to help facilitate this particular portion of the meeting. I hold no sort of office at all. So issues of official decision making is done either by Chairman Perry or by the board writ large. As a facilitator, my general rule and necessity is that I have to maintain comments by the board members first. This is obviously a public meeting, and we will open up the floor for public comment at all times, but just members of the public who we very, very much encourage to actively be involved and ask questions. Just please know that on a regular basis, when we pause for questions, I will always go to the members of the board first. And once those comments have been exhausted, then I will check into any members of the public that wish to speak. And that's by no means not meaning to be deferential to the public, but just for structural purposes, we need to do it that way since this is a Brown Act meeting. So with that, and I do again encourage members of the public to actively be involved throughout the evening tonight. So again, as a reminder, I'm going to hand it over here to Georgina. A key thing that we're really going to be focusing on as Georgina goes into the problem statements, and so a key thing for board members to be thinking about in particular with regards to the memo that was written and presented in your packet is moving forward, what's missing and what should be added. Not a revisitation of what should be changed from the last meeting, but what's missing that didn't come into the conversation in December and what should be added to make sure that this documentation of problem statements is accurate and is informing the next steps regarding developments of PMAs and undesirable results. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Georgina.
Okay, well, first I'm going to start off with the problem statement, and I don't actually have a presentation for this item because the draft problem statement is in your packet. And how I developed, it was a group effort really here. We developed this draft statement based off your feedback you provided at the workshop in December. And then what I drafted was reviewed by agency staff, and the end result is what you have in your packet. And then I need to point out that the notes that Sierra dutifully took during the workshop are also included at the back of the document to remind you of what all the points that were brought up during the workshop. So as Dave already kind of talked about, today we want to hear from you if you feel strongly that something is missing or has not been addressed adequately. And to make sure that we do have enough time for the next topic on the agenda, I'd like to ask that you provide any comments that don't fall into the feel strongly category to Nick Wallace by email within 2 weeks. And also, if you didn't get a chance to review that problem statement, provide your comments as well. And so what I'm going to do is go through generally what's in this problem statement, and it follows very much the format that we followed in the workshop. First, we just describe the desired conditions in the basin, and we agreed we talked about, I'm not sure if agreed, but no one objected to using the sustainability goals that the agency, the board has already drafted. It is a draft, and it may change. in the future, but that's what we have stated is our desired conditions in this basin. Then we went on to describe or identify current groundwater conditions that are considered a problem in the basin. And those boiled down to pretty much two areas. One was the lowered groundwater levels in specific parts of the basin. The other was nitrate and contaminants of emerging concern in basin groundwater. Then the problem statement goes over the consequences of each of those conditions for different users of water in the basin. And then we finally address or we talk about a proposal or solutions that are focused on just those solutions, though, that the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency has authority over. So if it's raising groundwater levels because they're lowered is an area where definitely the agency has authority over. And we talk about the different ways that you can raise groundwater level by active recharge, which would be direct injection of either treated drinking water or advanced treated wastewater into the Lompico aquifer. So recharging that actively by injection. Then there's passive recharge, which would be using surface water instead of pumping groundwater in out of the Lompico Basin in the South Scotts Valley area that is already where these lowered groundwater levels have occurred and are occurring. When it came to a solution to addressing the nitrate and contaminants of emerging concern, that's not a responsibility of the agency to take on. And we discussed this in several meetings several months ago when, as defined by the board, the agency's concern for significant and unreasonable degradation of groundwater is limited to those impacts caused by groundwater pumping or projects and management actions implemented by the agency or its member agencies. So interestingly, when I was putting this all together, I thought, this is very much kind of the beginnings of an executive summary for the GSP. So, and I'm using this as well to guide the model scenarios that we've developed, but it also has other purposes as well. So I'd like to hear if anyone has these strong feelings about something that's not included or should be added or taken out or whatever. And I think we have about 30 minutes for this item. I'm not sure who's keeping time, but like I said, if the discussion goes on a bit longer than what we had scheduled, then we're just going to have to get your comments by email. So I'll hand it back to Dave.
Okay, so Nick and I are both clocking time. So we want to open up the floor again via chat, as Nick spoke to, and as a reminder, we look to the chat to look for you all to just write the word question or comment or something to that effect, just so I know who's in the queue, and then I'll come to you and we open the floor for discussion. So opening the floor for comments. Again, what's missing, what needs to be added. The floor is yours, board members. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually have a few comments, but I'll start off with one. In section 2.1-8, it says it says we're going to be causing further lowering levels if the amount of groundwater extraction is not also reduced. I thought it would be pertinent to put in there, or unless water infiltration improvements are achieved. So meaning that if we were able to get some recharge projects going, it doesn't necessarily mean we need to reduce pumping.
So you're on page 2.1.8, you're saying, yes?
Section 2.1-8. Oh, no, that's page, I think you're right.
That's a page number. So can you identify which paragraph? Is it under the nitrate and contaminants section that you're speaking of, Jeff?
Prior to that, climate change, it starts out with climate change resulting in more extreme. Right. That paragraph right there. And it's about right in the middle. It says if the groundwater extraction is not also reduced. And I just thought we'd add a little or right at the very end of that sentence where it says also reduced, in the middle of there's a also reduced. If we
Yes.
added into that, or unless water infiltration improvements are achieved. Meaning that you can either reduce groundwater extraction or you can put more water in the ground. Either one will balance the equation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And what I'd like to do is right now, just to sort of stay consistent, is go ahead and take comments such as Jeff's regarding potential revisions, and then rare as this sometimes is, if there are conflicting perspectives by other board members or staff or whatever, then we can go to that. But I right now, I just want to sort of get the sum total of perspectives from board members about things that you think need to be added or changed. So thank you, Jeff. Other comments or suggestions? Okay, seeing none and hearing none. Are there any concerns? And again, I'm not, Jeff, you being new on the board, I'm not passing judgment on that. It's my responsibility to check in and see if anybody might feel differently before we modify a document that's going to be representing the board. So does anybody disagree with the addition that that Jeff just proposed? Okay, Ruth, go ahead. You've got a comment.
Yeah, I have a comment on the document as a whole, and there's a place where it says that it's undue financial burden on the city of Santa Cruz and its ratepayers. I think we should soften that. This isn't the place to decide whether it's an undue or if it's a due burden, but take out the undue, and also
Ruth,
in that.
can you speak to the citation, like the page number and location where you're speaking?
I'm gonna have to start scrolling. Hang on. Okay, 2.1.-10, the last bullet point, about 2/3 of the way down that paragraph.
Okay, it begins lower to groundwater levels.
Lower ground in the Santa Margarita and Lompico puts an undue financial burden on the city water service customers.
Okay. Okay. So your proposal, do you have a specific editorial proposal?
Well, at this point, just take out the undue. I just don't think that we should be deciding that, whether it's due or undue at that point. And I think it could open us up to liability down the line.
Okay. All right. I see comments now coming in, so we will go to Doug and then to Jeff. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so this is Doug. You know, the obligatory response to Ruth's comment is to put this in context, we're the only agency spending any money in order to try to maintain habitat in the river. We'd be glad to take contributions from other folks. It's certainly significant. I understand that undue might trigger folks given its history in the context of the conversations we're having here, but I can't live with striking it. I could live with significant or substantial as a replacement in this spot.
Okay. Let me before we go further into this discussion, let me come back to Georgina a minute and let's get a sort of a framing of the role that this document is going to play, and therefore the importance of wordsmithing. And I'm not passing judgment on the concern that Ruth has raised, nor the counter statement that Doug has raised. But if we're going to get into a wordsmithing exercise, which, as all of you know, is time consuming and is oftentimes necessary, but sometimes may not be in terms of the implications of certain language. So Georgina, what is the role that this document plays in terms of formal memorialization or the formal record of this agency?
I don't think the intent was to have it very formal. I mean, it obviously could be included as an appendix in the GSP, as you know, something that we developed. And like I said, I plan to use a good part of it in the executive summary. I think if we can you know, here we have not conflicting, but different opinions about how this should be worded. And I think that we need to not figure that out in the meeting here, and that we should, I can work with the people that are concerned to try and come up with something that everyone can live with.
Okay, all right. Is Ruth and Doug, is that acceptable to you all? I can just kind of look at your pictures. There I go. See thumbs up. Awesome, guys. Look at that. Who says virtual doesn't work, huh? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your flexibility on that. But nonetheless, let's let the record show that that item is a question, and it is going to need to be an action item for Georgina as a follow-on. Let's go to Jeff, and then to Dale, and then to Gail.
I was just kind of in agreement with Doug on that, and I would like to be in on that conversation when it occurs, just so it doesn't end up being any financial burden whatsoever. And I do have an idea to contribute in that area to help reduce the nitrates in the stream potentially. So I would be open to being involved in a discussion on that if we don't do it.
Just again, that's, you know, that'll ultimately be sort of a project management, a PMA type discussion, but for the purposes of changing the language, then the record will show that you've requested to be a part of that discussion that Georgina will have with you and Ruth and with Doug. Let's go to Dale and then to Gail.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something that might be missing, and that's demand. Increase in demand. You know, we're looking at ways to support the current demand and potential increased demand, but you know, should we also be looking at the demand as a problem, or you know, something that we need to be mindful of as well? And I'm really just kind of throwing it out there as a thought, and to see what other people might think about that.
And demand, when you say demand, Dale, you're talking literally like extraction demand, basically use of extracted water.
Right, additional uses that will be a demand on supply, and that will, you know, continually negatively affect supply because the demand continues to increase. And so is that a potential problem?
Okay, Georgina, let me come to you about that, because that raises kind of an interesting, almost philosophical as well as semantic question of, you know, when does demand as an act of using the basin switch over from being just demand for demand's sake into part of a problem statement?
Yeah, I think that, you know, how I try to categorize what would be included in here and addressed is anything that the agency has authority over. Now, if, you know, the agency could decide that we have to have cuts in groundwater pumping, they could do that. But we're trying not to do that, get to that point. You know, that's why we know that there's a certain demand increase, and that's included in our future simulations. And then so you just have to manage around that these are going to happen. The agency can't change land use. It doesn't have authority to do that. And so we're tied of what we can and cannot do. So this is the issue of demand is something that I think is the agency is not going to take that on. We're going to manage around it by having projects and management actions that support that demand, is how I see it.
So Georgina, I mean, if I may then step in, and then I want to come back to Dale, and for the purposes of the whole board, how does that get reconciled? I'm asking a little bit of a rhetorical question because I think I know, but for the purposes of discussion, you're right. None of the, the agency as a GSA does not have land use authority. However, the GSA very purposely has member agencies, at least one of which has land use authority, which is the county. And the agency has an obligation and an authority to engage with other agencies when there may be a circumstance where there's conflicting policies. The GSA has an authority and responsibility, if it so chooses to take it, to engage with, for instance, the city of Scotts Valley or the county or whomever, to weigh in on something that might have an impact to groundwater availability. So I know what you're saying about sort of the working around, but the agency does have an obligation and the authority to engage in conversation with other agencies should that happen in the future. So how does that get reconciled then with what you just said? Georgina, are you muted?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, it works the same way with the nitrates where the agency doesn't really have regulatory control over contamination, and it doesn't want to because there are agencies already set up to do that. But it does want to be involved. It does want to know where the contamination is, what is being done to clean it up. And so the same way that the agency does need to be involved in land use, and those two things I see very similarly. And here in this document, I do talk about that nitrates and CECs, these are already pre-existing things that have been going on for years, are not something that the agency wants to take on. So I see those very similarly.
Okay, so now I want to come back. I know we got people in the queue, but I want to make sure that back and forth took place a little bit. Now I want to come back to Dale. Dale, does that therefore speak to or answer to the things that you have concern about or assuage your concerns or?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm, overly concerned about it. I mean, we should be concerned about it, because it is a major part of the equation as the demand increases. Therefore, you need to continue to meet that demand. And so at what point, where's the breaking point? So I just didn't know if that was something that we wanted to try to add in here as a way that the agency can, try to be a part of that or monitor at it. But if we can't, then, and it totally makes sense, Georgina, what you said, as the agency doesn't have direct, responsibility there. But I just know it's part of the overall equation. I didn't know if we wanted to try to address that.
So let me offer a suggestion just as a placeholder. I'm not sure, and Georgina, I'm going to defer to you and completely. I'm not sure that exactly how what Dale is raising is necessarily residing in this document, the problem statement document, but I would maybe go to Perrette, not to be responded to right now, but as a placeholder that, somewhere in the GSP or somewhere in future discussions by this agency, or perhaps even not until the GSP is actually enacted, this idea of, again, what are the authorities that the agency actually seeks to employ that are statutorily provided to it, but that it has to make a decision as to what it wants to use or not. And that goes all the way back to the GSA roles and responsibilities presentation that I did a couple years ago. Does that sound reasonable to you, Perrette? Just to make sure as a placeholder.
Yeah, it's good. I took a note of that.
It is an important policy item, I think. All right, let's go on to Gail then, please.
Yes, thank you. Actually, Georgina sort of answered my question in responding to Dale, and that is we have two problems that we've stated. One is groundwater lowering, and the other is nitrates and CECs. And my response to this is that twice now this evening in the first half hour, Georgina has told us that the GSA does not have responsibility over nitrates and CECs because it's other agencies that actually control that. And so I'm wondering why we would want to take on a topic over which we're neither responsible nor that we have any control over, given that these things are things that come out of essentially septic systems. Now, if you were talking about drilling an ASR well that caused one release of arsenic, that would be a different matter. But these are not things that are in our bailiwick. And so I think it's really wrong. First, I would just simply not want it to be there, but it's certainly wrong to have it be equal in weight to the first one, which is the main goal of the activities that we're doing and is the main goal of the legislation, which is to stabilize or bring back groundwater levels. And I'll just add that I did make these comments to Georgina before, but I guess they weren't accepted.
All right, well, let's go to Georgina, and then I think Rosemary may have a comment to weigh into the comment that Gail made. But Georgina, let me come to you first about this. I mean, this gets into this water quality conundrum as a sustainability indicator that we wrestle with regularly.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't want to discount this issue of the nitrate and CCs because it is, although it doesn't affect people in this basin, it does impact downstream users of the surface water. And I mean, we say for now that the CC, that the CCs, which are contaminants of emerging concern, don't affect people in the basin. Well, we don't know enough about them yet to know. They're very, very, very low levels. But, we know for the nitrate is okay. It's not above drinking water standards. The CECs, they're still doing all the regulatory agents and the EPA are still doing all their tests to figure out how to handle regulation of CECs. And for now, the basin is okay from those, but like I started to say, it's a downstream users who is the city of Santa Cruz that is impacted by that. And anything that we do in this basin, we can't impact our neighbors, and that's in the regulations. And so, again, I don't want to not include it because it is an issue, and I'm sure if you were, Doug was quite animated about it in our December meeting, and I could sense that it was it's really important to them that I did want to include it. If I had not included it, it would be kind of ignoring it. But in the solutions is where I do say that this is something that we can't take on, as Gail rightly kind of summarized there.
So
well, then why would we emphasize it so much in the problem? Giving it equal weight if in the end we say we can't really do anything about this because we have no regular authority. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I'm really worried, given that I come from a poor water district, that we're taking on responsibility for something that we just simply can't afford to solve or be responsible for. I mean, we can maybe be held to do no harm, make it no worse, but we can't be held to fixing it. And so I just don't think this makes any sense, and I strongly object. But I'll just leave it there.
All right, let me go to Rosemary, who I presume may be wanting to weigh in from a Santa Cruz perspective, and then let's continue this discussion because it is a conundrum.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate Gail's comments, and I also appreciate Georgina's comments. I think that to some degree, Georgina is reflecting a comment that I think both Doug and I had after probably the meeting in November. I don't think it was the December one, where we were sort of struck by the fact that there's a lot of conversation in this basin about taking a credit, if you will, for the septic recharge as an element that helps the basin to maintain its sustainability, or will in the long run help the basin to maintain its sustainability. And my comment at the time that was being emphasized was, it seems a little bit kind of uneven to me, maybe that's the nicest way to say it, to take credit for something that creates a problem for someone else and not to at least acknowledge the problem. That's all I really have to say.
So let me pose a risk analysis question. When I'm talking about risk, I'm talking about risk in the context of the defensibility and the likelihood of approval of the GSP by DWR. Recognizing the concern that Gail has about equivalency, if you will, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Gail, but clearly I don't hear you saying that there's not an issue there, but you're concerned about perhaps the way it's being portrayed in equivalency to other items. Georgina, from a risk analysis perspective, if there was nothing said or nothing addressing this issue in water quality, do you have a professional opinion of whether that would put this GSP at risk when being reviewed by DWR? Not necessarily that it needs to be portrayed in an equivalency issue to the point that Gail is perhaps speaking to, but is there a way basically to ensure that there's something there that DWR could sort of check the box and recognize, okay, yes, the Santa Margarita Basin is acknowledging this is an issue. They didn't just sort of look the other way, but it maybe doesn't make it equivalent. I'm trying to problem solve and just ask a question, a risk assessment question at the same time.
Yeah, so yeah, that is a good question to pose, Dave, and it is actually in section 2, which is on the basin setting and basin conditions. We do talk about all of this stuff in there already. So it's already in the draft section 2 that many of you have looked at already. So it's not that we're saying it's not there. We don't like not talk about it. It's already it is in there. I think where Gail's concern is that that it appears that we would be addressing it because it's in the problem statement, and that I don't, and nowhere in the GSP were we going to be addressing the nitrate and CEC issue. It's just identifying it, that it is an issue to some people, and that there are plans and management things that are being done by the county and by others and the state board to try and remedy these things. So that's identified.
To move the ball along, then, just recognizing we are on time, can we promise to have you take another crack at this in a manner that, like I said, I'm trying to find the sweet spot where the acknowledgement is still there, so that both the basin is legitimately acknowledging things and is sending a message to DWR that it is acknowledging things, but that can perhaps address this. Look, we're making this sound more equivalent than perhaps it should be because there's nothing we can do about it dynamic that Gail's raising. So do you think you can take another crack at that? And maybe perhaps it can be bounced back and forth to Doug, for instance, and Gail as two people who have had strong perspectives about these? Is that a reasonable thing to take a shot at?
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be discussing it with the agency staff to the best way of doing it. And you know, pertinent to your question of how right do we have to get this document? I think we do need to talk with the staff that are planning this GSP along with me to figure out exactly where this goes.
Okay, Gail, do you feel, again, I'm trying to find sort of that sweet spot, and I don't want you feeling like I'm dispensing with your concern, but I'm also trying to, like I said, find that. Do you feel like that's at least a reasonable next step to try to grapple with the point you're making?
I just don't think it should be in the problem statement. I think that we should talk about it in other places, but it's not, there is no equivalency. And I just think it's a mistake. And I would rather that just simply be left out of the problem statement and brought up as she says. So, you know, you could, if people feel strongly about this, that they really want this as part of our problem, then maybe making it shorter. But I think other people need to express their opinions about this. And I don't want it just to be, you know, me and Rosemary and Dale duking it out over this. I think the rest of the board needs to express their opinion.
Well, let me go to Doug first, because I know that Doug, on behalf of Santa Cruz, has had some strong opinions. So Doug, where might you be at? And then I think Gail's right, we need to hear from some other folks.
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable resolving this offline if it involves, I don't know, maybe softening some language or something, but it is a fundamental part of the context here. It is something that's been raised from the standpoint, as Rosemary pointed out, in terms of, if you want to think of it as intellectual honesty, of the mass balance equation on the water math here. And you know, frankly, there are other ways to deal with this besides having the critters in the streams and the folks, the beneficial users who are using surface water downstream, absorbing all the impact. Now, as it stands right now, we're shouldering that burden. And as is the case with the reduced flows, we're shouldering that burden on our own. It would read on the in lieu solution to the extent that there are going to be other significant surface water takes. And And finally, I was going to propose, but not necessarily this evening because time, that an adequate response to the stated problem is, we commit not to make it any worse. And as Georgina pointed out, monitoring it, working with the agencies that have active PMAs in place to try to deal with it is a decent point. I mean, I think it's a little bit, again, unrealistic to say that it'll never be an issue for groundwater users. And we're saying right now that nitrate and levels aren't necessarily affecting pumpers, but we do know there are nitrates in the Santa Margarita. And it's a known unknown what the impacts of the CECs that are detected at trace levels in the groundwater are going to have on folks. So no, I don't think we can remove it. Yes, I can say that right now it's not a problem we're going to address as an agency. That could change. The fact that we don't have a stance today about how we're going to solve it could and may have to change in the future.
So getting down to sort of the brass tacks on this document, I want to make sure I understand, are you saying that you could be comfortable, you could or could not be comfortable removing it as a form of a problem statement as long as it is being acknowledged elsewhere in the GSP that it is an issue? I mean, obviously it's going to be discussed as part of the basin setting regarding water quality conditions somewhere.
No, sorry, I must not have been clear. I do think it belongs in the problem statement. Yeah, we had that argument in November. I think it can be framed in such a way that the equivalence that Gail is drawing can be modified. To my mind, that equivalence is non-existent, given that in the solution section, we're not claiming that we're going to fix it, but it is part of the overarching context here, and it's a problem.
Okay, I see that there's a comment from Mark. So just Mark, as a reminder, I apologize, but we only use the chat as a means to sort of get into the queue. So I'm going to ask for the purposes of the recorded record. I see your comment, but I'd like you to, at all times, we ask that the board members actually speak their statement rather than just write it into the chat. So I'm going to go to Director Smalley at this point. You may be on mute.
I'm on the okay. I agree with Gail. I don't think that this belongs in the problem statement. I don't think that that's the purpose, the goal of our document, to bring up the problems that aren't something that's within this agency's jurisdiction to then try to go solve with the focus that it currently has.
Okay. Let's continue this conversation. I need to be cognizant of time. We began this particular section at around 5:50. We were aiming for 30 minutes. We are at about 30 minutes, but this is obviously a conundrum that I think we need to spend a couple more minutes on. So are there other board members that would like to weigh in on this difference of opinion, or one side or the other? I feel compelled to weigh in here at this point that this is probably reflective of where things are going to be going in your upcoming board meetings all. As the stakes start getting higher, as the decisions start getting more critical, as we start sort of circling back to the interests of your various organizations, and decisions are needing to be made in an increasingly rapid basis to finalize this document, board member silence is going to be less and less feasible. I'm sorry, you don't like hearing me say that, and I'm sure you guys could all say, Dave, you're in no position to be telling us that because we're board members, and I get that, and I apologize, but nonetheless, you're going to have to start taking opinions because things are going to have to start getting reconciled. And neither Georgina nor myself have the authority to reconcile things. We only have the authority to help work with you all to do so. So let me go to Chris and then to Jack.
The reason I was not saying anything is because I think there are two valid points being made. I don't see the harm in acknowledging something that is. As long as we're not trying to solve it and say we're not trying to solve it, then I don't think it's a danger. to acknowledge something that everybody knows, including the state, is an issue we've got that we are dealing with, and that the city of Santa Cruz is dealing with. So
All right.
I think it would be kind of, it would be, since we haven't mentioned elsewhere, and it's certainly it's not a good thing, but we're not saying we're going to fix it either.
Okay. Let me come back. There's a couple people in the queue, but let me come back to Gail and to Mark and sort of employ the interest-based approach that is what I do for a living. I believe I hear you saying that you recognize it's a problem, but as has been said by a couple people, that's not a problem that can be done anything about. So when we talk about what the deeper concern is that you have here, and by articulating something in a problem statement, Gail, I heard you refer to earlier briefly about as a representative of an agency member that has got other financial obligations, it concerns you if there's going to be something that's written that might have a financial implication. Is that principally what the concern is, that there's a potential or a fear in your mind that there's a connect the dots dynamic here, that by virtue of having this as a problem statement, it could end up turning into a solution that you do not feel SLV's got the requirement or let alone the resources to have to deal with? So let's kind of peel the onion a little bit and get to what the heart of the concern is for you.
Sure. That's part of it. But I guess in response to Chris's point, we have also things that we know are problems. We have Bean Creek, which is largely devoid of water sometimes. We have affected salmonid ability to migrate. We've affected groundwater dependent ecosystems, but they are not listed in the problem statement. So I think this idea that somehow we give prominence to a problem that is actually not a problem, in the sense that for in the basin, all of the values for nitrates and the CECs are below at least those are potential problems. There are other problems that we have that we know we have with the salmon and the groundwater dependent ecosystems, and we don't list them. So I don't think that that argument isn't compelling to me. It's partly the financial, and it's partly as an organization. I think we should agree about what our focus is. And the problem statement has to be that statement. It has to say what our focus is. And what we've done in this problem statement is we've said that solving the nitrate and the CECs is as important as solving the groundwater levels. And I just don't think that's the case.
All right, Mark, I want to come to you with the same question, because then I want to double back over to Georgina to get back to the heart of the purpose of the problem statements, because as Gail is saying, maybe what this actually reflects is that there's a informational deficiency thus far because of these other problems that Gail has spoken to.
We do have the other problems mentioned in this document. In 2.110 page, talk about the coho, we talk about the steelhead, we talk about the groundwater levels having a effect on them.
Okay. Do respect Director Perry, but if you're going to need me to facilitate, then I need to make sure that people aren't just sort of jumping in that way. Otherwise, I can't do my job. So, Director Smalley, I'm going to look to you again to the same question, which is, the underlying concern. You've expressed an opinion and a desire of what to do or not to do. What is the underlying concern and interest that you want to make sure? And again, everybody on this board has underlying motivating interests. That's how people work. That's how everybody works at your job. What is the underlying concern about including or not including things? There's no judgment being passed. I just want to kind of peel the onion, and then I'll come back to the queue. And also want to go to Georgina to further clarify the purpose of stating these problems, however encyclopedic or not that may be. Mark?
Yes, the underlying concern is the fact that it is part of the problem statement. And yes, as stated, there's other problems that are brought up in the document, but they're not given the focus that the nitrates and CECs are. So it's the focus on that is equal weight to the groundwater aspects.
And so again, this is a conceptual concern to you? Just sort of look at it's just not right, or again from an impact to SLV who you represent?
With the likelihood that at some point down the line, is this going to become then something that we need to begin to deal with?
Okay, so it's a manner of how do we articulate and acknowledge something, but not have it turn into something that at a later date becomes a de facto responsibility to address.
Right. Yes.
Okay. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I just want to try to understand. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go to Georgina. I want to again just come to you for a framing of the purpose and use of the problem statement discussion and document, so we're all clear on its implications. And then I'm going to go back to the queue, which is Doug, and I think I may have missed Doug in the queue earlier, and I apologize, Doug. And then I think Jack, because I'd gone to Chris, but I thought Doug's comment was prior. So Georgina, let's go to you, and then I want to go to Jack and do to Doug.
Right. There was never really the intent to have this document in the GSP and say, this is our problem statement. It was, as I hopefully I conveyed to you when we were talking about the problem statement in early in December, that it needed it to help focus the modeling, the projects and management actions that might be needed in the basin. What do we really need to address? And so all the projects and management actions that we have right now are attempting to address the lowering of groundwater levels. That's what I used it for. And so I'm not sure how caught up we need to get into the wordsmithing, but the intent or the concepts being discussed now are important for the document as a whole, but I was not going to be saying calling a section problem statement ever in the GSP. We don't need to do that. This is just a tool for us to focus our modeling efforts.
Okay, I want to caution you, Georgina, and I'm sorry, but I want to caution you that when we talk about not wordsmithing, I understand that you're saying that from sort of an organizational and time, keeping an eye on time and things like that. But when board members are expressing concerns and it takes the form of wordsmithing, it's because of the underlying factors. They're concerned and they have a right to be concerned that they're doing their job. So I just want to caution you to not accidentally be dismissing that. I think, again, you've clarified that this was to help direct modeling with regards to PMAs, not necessarily intended to be part of the GSP. Nonetheless, the concerns that are being raised by Gail and by Mark are that a document can have the risk, and I think we all know this, can have the risk of taking a life of its own. So I think that we have to sort of find a way of doing what you needed to do, which is to help inform modeling in terms of delegation of resources of what we're going to focus on. And other people are saying we need intellectual honesty in this document writ large. And Mark and Gail are also saying, but we can't have this become sort of like a Trojan horse at a later date. Let me go to Doug, and then let me go to Jack, and then see if we can get some conclusions of where to go next on this. Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And what I want to try to do, I guess, is just relate what I'm going to refer to as the fact pattern that besides just the interests I represent on the board, but the fact pattern that got me to trying to articulate those interests in the way that I have to date. And it's there's a few points here I just need to make, and they kind of come together. I mean, from my perspective, this is inseparable from, frankly, several of our key sustainability indicators or other key concepts, other key Sigma concepts. This directly relates to water quality from my perspective, given the way this given the way this basin works. And the groundwater surface water interactions certainly relate not just to groundwater levels, but also to not just to surface water levels, but also to surface water quality. And we've talked before that there are categories of beneficial users whose interests we need to take into account, not just humans. And we're trying to balance all those things. As an agency, we've been pretty clear that we're almost never going to take on any projects ourselves, right? I mean, we had that conversation in the last couple of months. Only under those circumstances where, and we couldn't even come up with a good example of it, but we left it in there as a possible category, where none of our member agencies wanted to take on the project. You know, we might pick something up, but the fact is we're going to be monitoring what's going on here and working with the responsible agencies to improve the situation in the basin. So no, I don't see how this creates any sort of a liability for SMGWA. Finally, as regards the river itself, you know, fact on the table, right? This river has been judged impaired due to nitrate for decades. The county has been investing dollars, efforts, and time into trying to resolve that, working with the folks living in the basin who are causing that problem or substantially contributing to that problem. To deny that it's there and deny that that one of our member agencies is taking on substantial efforts to try to resolve it, and then individuals in the basins are making substantial investments to try to mitigate it, is, again, just being disingenuous. So I think the way we framed it is perfectly reasonable. It is an ineluctable aspect of the reality of this basin. And we have member agencies who are dealing with it. We are not taking it on as one of our primary goals at this point, given the data we have about water quality at the wellheads. And
Okay, I want to
so
be.
that's the constellation that gets me where I'm at.
Okay, and I want to be cautious, and I know you do too, Doug, because I know you. I didn't actually hear Gail nor Mark deny or choosing to deny anything. They are expressing concern about the implications. You have a different perspective of what the implications may or may not be of this document. They're expressing one version of that, you're expressing another, but they never expressed any concern or any attempt to deny something. So I think what we need to try to be doing here is try to find a way to serve what Georgina is indicating, which is to help inform the modeling and to maintain, as you used the term, intellectual honesty, and make sure that this document and any other documents are accurately depicting where challenges are, but also be careful to make sure that there's not something that creates a dynamic that might create fear of future implications, and that could swing both ways. That could swing to any other agency that is a member of this. So that's the sweet spot that I'm trying to get us to tonight. We're not going to get there tonight. I'm just trying to get us sort of in a direction or a trajectory of that. And then I think then based upon this conversation, the best we can do is Georgina's got to go back to the drawing board and take another crack at languaging on some things. Jack, let's go to you. And then we're going to have to open up the floor for public comment. I know that Frank has been patiently waiting and there are other people. So we got to keep moving along here because we still got another item to go to. So let's go to Jack and then continue on.
Okay. Well, I like the idea of it being included somewhere. It's something. It's our neighbor. Somebody shares the the water but I have a thought. What if we took it out or separated it and put it under a category called something like other consequences not addressed with management actions included in the GSP? Kind of saying, hey, this is noted as something, and yet we're not addressing it in our GSP. And if we think there's anything else that we should be noting, we could tack it into that same section.
Yeah, and I think that that's a creative solution. That's kind of the direction I'm thinking that Georgina might be able to go to. So let's kind of set that as an idea, and then let's continue on with the board members. Chris, you're in the queue. Board members is Chris, then Eden, Doug. You may have already spoken to something. You've gone into the queue earlier on, and then Jeff, and then I'm going to need for us to try to get closure on this, and then open up the floor for public comment. But let's go back to Chris.
Yes, that was pretty much, I was going to say something like that. It's kind of in response to what Mark was saying, yeah, I don't think we need to emphasize it as much as it is. And I believe I heard this document itself is not going to be in our GSP. Am I correct, Georgina? Okay, so it's not even in the GSP. So yeah, let's just make sure when we mention that it is in a topic area like Jack is talking about. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Eden. I'll double back around to Doug and then to Jeff.
I'm just further refining the same thing, which is as we get into the nitty gritty, if we're going to avoid drawing lines in the sand about this stuff, we should delineate on each document we're looking at whether or not we're working on something that's going to be a part of the GSP or whether we're just working on something for our own mission statement or philosophy about the planet or whatever. So.
Okay, that's a very important distinction, and it's important to remember that these kinds of documents, even if they don't go in the GSP, they become a matter of the administrative record of your process too. So you are a public agency, so there's that too. Doug, was there additional that you had or okay, great. And then Jeff, let me go to you, and then I'm going to circle back to public comment.
Yeah, mine's kind of in a form of a question. The way this document's structured is that the first part says, okay, lower groundwater is causing these problems, and then it lists the problems. So I'd like to know what percentage of the nitrate problem is caused by the lowered aquifer levels in the Lompico. If that's a significant cause, then maybe we should put it in there. And if it's a very small proportion of the nitrate problem, then maybe we shouldn't. I don't know the answer to that. So I just thought that would help maybe kind of guide us toward a resolution here.
Okay, Georgina, any immediate response that you can provide to Jeff's question, or is that something you got to think about?
No, there's no linkage between those two. If groundwater levels were high, there would still be nitrate in the groundwater.
Okay. All right, so we have a couple of board members who have come forward with suggestions on how to modify this approach a little bit. I'd like to propose for time's purposes that hopefully Gail and Mark, you're feeling like your issues have been heard, and some of your fellow board members here put out an idea how to modify things. I'd like to propose for time purposes that we let Georgina take a crack at accommodating both what you've said and what some of the board members have also said, both to honor the issues that have been raised, but a way of framing things differently. So with that, I see a thumbs up. Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for public comment to Frank Cheap. Good evening, Frank. How are you?
Good evening. Fantastic. Happy to be here. And I've been to many board meetings, and actually I like the controversy and discussion. I think it's healthy. Groundwater pollution via nitrates. I think I mentioned it one of my first calls. The county came back and said, yes, it's our charter to enforce it, but they really don't do much, in the sense that if I'm a septic system owner, I can pump it or not pump it. I can have it pollute the groundwater. Being a private well owner, I maintain my septic system. I would certainly like to see the county do more in terms of true enforcement. I think there's a couple different options out there. The pumping septic companies have to pull permits, maybe a reminder that you haven't pumped your tank every so often. And I think in terms of whether or not it's in a problem statement, certainly a discussion that's an hour and 10 minutes now, maybe too much. But, if water, certainly in the Santa Margarita aquifer, private well owners draw off that significantly. So we're probably at more risk of that water nitrate being in contamination. Georgina says it's not an issue, but I would like to see some ability from the county to actually monitor and enforce well owners and septic system folks doing their part to keep groundwater sort of drinkable. If groundwater becomes polluted and goes offline, that inherently affects the water supply for everybody and requires the municipalities to drill deeper, take more water, and then affect the whole ecosystem. So those are my comments, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Frank. Okay, with that, I am going to suggest that we move on to the next agenda item, because it too is a biggie. Anybody opposed to that? Nick, I see your hand up.
Yeah, real quick, let me just check the phones in case there's anybody calling.
Thank you. I apologize.
All right, so if you're a member of the public and you're calling in via telephone, if you want to make a public comment at this time, you have been unmuted. If you're a member of the public and you have a public comment, this is your time. Hearing none, seeing none.
Okay, thank you very much. Georgina, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic.
Okay, Nick's gonna let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Nick, you see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about the results of model scenarios. And I'm going to let you know upfront here that the presentation is not going to go as I initially thought it was going to go. What you have in your packet are the results of model scenarios simulated using the climate change projection that we'd selected, primarily because we wanted consistency across the different planning efforts in the region. And it's one of the climate change projections that the city of Santa Cruz has been using for their water supply resiliency planning. And if you've already gone through the presentation, you see that the projection or the climate projection implemented in the model is very much drier than the historical conditions. It really is a stress test on the basin and water supply system and should be and needs to be considered a worst case scenario. We based the future simulations on this climate projection, not really knowing what the outcomes might be. And this is a common challenge that everyone developing GSPs in the state is dealing with. You know, what is the right climate change projection to use? In reality, because no one can predict the future, there's no right answer when it comes to climate change projections. And DWR, who will be evaluating the GSPs, knows this. But while they know this, there's also the real risk that of how to select climate, how a selected climate projection might impact future conditions or simulated future conditions, and how that affects what ultimately gets put into the GSP. And what we see from the model results using this worst case climate projection is that there is a large recharge deficit to the aquifers that results in declining groundwater levels and losses of groundwater in storage. That really would be a big challenge for those agencies and private individuals that rely on groundwater for their needs. So I've decided to cut to the chase here and save us a lot of time going through all the slides in the slide deck. There were a lot, I'm sure. If you had a look, you would agree. But what the model results are showing is that because the climate change projection we used is so dry, the 3 projects we modeled aren't able to improve groundwater levels in the basin above current levels that we were hoping for. We were hoping that they would improve things, right? Even if all the pumping in the basin stopped, there would still be declining groundwater levels in parts of the basin, simply because there isn't enough rainfall and recharge happening to replenish the basin's aquifers as much as historical rainfall has done. So what I think is the most important thing to do at this time, and what I want to do next, is to go through some of the slides in the presentation, just some of them, not all of them. And these are ones that are important for what we need to focus our efforts on tonight. Basically, do we stick with a worst case climate projection, or do we use one that is not a worst case and won't create untenable outcomes? To stay on schedule developing the GSP, we also tonight have to decide on what other potential project scenarios should be developed and run. And to speed things up, I've hidden the slides in the slide deck that we won't talk about. So that's why this slide, the slide sequence might look a little different to what's in the packet. The page numbers are still the same though. Okay, I'm gonna turn on mine over here. And with that, I'm gonna, this was.
Can I interrupt, Georgina?
Yes.
Just for me, I'm not seeing the screen. I've got the presentation up. Can you just tell me the page number you're on so I know what to pull up, please? When you're doing it.
It's slide 2 I'm on now. You cannot see anything. Can anyone see anything?
I have it on my end.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes,
You have to
Dave.
hide,
I can see it.
Chris, you have to hide everyone and it pops up.
There's probably a metaphor in there somewhere too, Chris, but anyway. Actually, while we're paused, let me, and I know Georgina wants to dive in, but given that Georgina just called an audible for necessary purposes, anybody have any immediate questions or comments to Georgina on this change up that they want to raise? Okay, seeing none and hearing none. Thanks. Georgina, go ahead.
Okay, so the objective really now has changed from what you see here, but basically we're still going to look at the baseline scenario that represents a no project condition. I'm going to tell you about some of the assumptions that went into that. And we're going to not go into a really in-depth look at the results of those model scenarios. I'm going to rather give you a kind of a more summary, high-level view of that. So all those tables and charts and things, don't worry, we're going to skip those. And then really, I want to get to the discussion, because like we've just had a very robust discussion on the problem statement, I expect it to be even more so with this, with the discussion we'll have at the end of this. So the baseline scenario assumptions take into account demand increases from Scotts Valley Water District and San Lorenzo Valley Water District. They're very small amounts per year of increase, but I got this information from them. And then also we considered Mount Herman. I talked to Dale to figure out what they would have, and you know, he said that it would be very similar to what has been recently. It would change based on different water year types. So all of this is built into the simulation. Private well owners, we assume that the demand stays constant at 0.3 acre feet per year, and we don't assume an increase in population. So that's a pretty much a fixed number through the 53-year simulation period. And small water systems, their demand remains similar to what they have historically. Now, when it comes to the climate change, which is the other big driver of the baseline here, is that you had heard from Sean Chartrand, and he may be even on the phone right now. I'm not too sure.
I saw him come in earlier, so I think he is here. Sean,
excellent.
I am on the call. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Hi, Sean.
Thanks. Hi.
So,
hi, everyone.
So we're using an adjusted GFDL climate change scenario. Now, GFDL means Geophysical Fluid Dynamic Laboratory, and this is the group that came up with this climate change scenario. The city has been using this for their planning purposes, but they put a filter onto this to make it drier, because they were looking for this stressed condition, right? So that's why it's called an adjusted GFDL. Okay, so what does the climate look like into the future here? What is this climate change? This is rainfall plotted on this chart, and then what you see in the blue is, hold on here, let me get fancy. What you see in the blue is the historic rainfall. And you can see it varies from over 80. This was in 2017 when we had a lot of rain, and down to at the least is about 20 inches per year. This represents the rainfall in the projected climate. As you can see, we don't have anything above 60, and then there are many years below 20 inches. This results in an average of 29 inches, which is 60% of the 44 inches that we've seen historically. So it is It is very dry. We also, with this climate data set, we got temperature data, and from temperature data, we can estimate the amount of evapotranspiration that would happen in the basin. And historically, the blue line is showing, because it's a true fact that temperature is increasing. You can see that clearly, and it has an impact here on evapotranspiration, and that trend follows on in this projection. Now, the thing when you have increased evapotranspiration, if you just think of the whole basin as a bathtub, and you have rainfall coming in, and it's much hotter now, right? So the plants and are evapotranspirating at a higher rate, and so now once you take the evapotranspiration out, which is increasing, you have much less water available for runoff into the streams and then for recharge into the aquifers. So this is a component of all climate change scenarios that have hotter conditions. Yes, some don't have as hot. There's a whole host of them. If you remember what Sean went through all of this some time ago. Okay, so now what does this look like in the model, right? So here, this is the only chart I'm going to show you like this. These are two charts. These are the water budget charts, and you might remember them from before. The chart on the left is the historical water budget, and the one on the right is the simulated future water budget, and that's 53 years long of a period, and the historical is 34 years. You've got the dates over here. The different colors are representing the different components. The ones above the zero are the inflow components of the water budget. So the blue is the recharge, precipitation recharge. It's got the septic return flows, all the different kinds of return flows, etc. What's below the line are the outflows from the groundwater system, which would be pumping in the brown, and then the green here is groundwater discharge to streams, which is by far the largest component of discharge of groundwater in the basin. Now the scales on both of these are exactly the same, but these bars are skinny because we're fitting about 20 more years into here. So, but the heights of these bars are representing the same volumes of water, and it's very clear that in the future we have much less precipitation recharge happening in the basin because of there being much less rainfall. You know, the amount of pumping is actually reduced, and then the amount of groundwater that flows back into the creeks is reduced as well for the reasons I just explained. What you see in the dashed line here is a cumulative change of groundwater and storage. And, you know, we've all seen that there was about 30,000 acre-feet of decline over 34 years historically. But now we add another 40,000 using this climate projection because it is so low. But overall, if you look at it per year, there is less of a decline on average. It's about 750 acre-feet per year in the simulation, and historically when we had that big drop, it was over 1,000 acre-feet per year. So this is what the baseline water budget looks like. I'm going to pause here to see if people have questions before I go on to the next slide, which is about the model scenarios.
Okay, opening the floor. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, hi there. I was pretty struck by opening these slides up and seeing that in all cases, all of our plans and actions just go to pot pretty quick, and none of them come out good. If you look up California climate change, you find California's climateassessment.cal.gov reports, which are great, and they have a section for the Central Coast, and they talk about Santa Cruz. And they have a conclusion that overall rainfall will actually go up in Santa Cruz, in the city of Santa Cruz, as well as Santa Cruz County. And so when we chose a model where when I looked over these numbers very carefully, it appears that we took Santa Cruz's model and we didn't adjust it. What we have here is a model that shows 12% lower rainfall coming into our aquifer than the city of Santa Cruz gets on an annual basis. So we actually took Santa Cruz's numbers instead of the mountain rainfall. And when we reduced Santa Cruz's city's numbers by 12% and then used that and put that into our model. And the guest speakers we've had in our meetings in the past few years have not agreed with that. They have said, no, overall rainfall is looking like it's going to go up. Just it'll be difficult. It'll come in shorter periods, shorter months of the year, higher temperatures. We agree with all that. But the suggestion that there's just going to be a 53-year drought, which is what this amounts to, I'm sorry, but this looks like it was a 53-year drought was put into our model without really thinking about making a compensation to take Santa Cruz's data and compensate it for the mountain conditions where you have much higher rainfall levels. So, I understand why Santa Cruz went really dark on their outlook, because they have to be very careful. They only have a stream to collect water from. And if it goes dry, it goes dry, and they're in a bad situation. We don't have to go to a worst case scenario to make our decisions. We have the Lompico that has some margin in it to get us through a couple of dry years. We should have used, RCP 4.5 or RCP 8.5, the standard projections for our area. And this is a fundamental input into all the slides that you're going to see tonight, is this rainfall model. It swamps out any of the actions that we've chosen to do. We can't even see really what the actions are doing for us, because this lack of rain is the Godzilla, and we're just the flea on the back of Godzilla's tail there. I'm really disappointed that we did 3 models in a row with this really low rainfall input, and we didn't really get to see what really is the state of California's best science suggests what we're really going to have here. We ran 0 models with that, and we weren't able to. The change is so great with the climate here, you can't really see the distinctions in the outcomes of the actions. I have some suggestions about where to go from here. I'd like to. I guess I'll pause for a moment and see if we have any comments about that.
Yeah, let me go to Doug. I mean, definitely that is ultimately the purpose of this discussion, as Georgina framed it, for the very reasons you've just expressed there, Jeff. So let me go to Doug. We'll double back around because we do need solutions of where to go next here. So Doug, I'll go to you.
Yeah, and when we do get into that conversation, I might be able to shed some light from the city perspective. But I had a much more pedestrian question, Georgina, and just had to do with these evapotranspiration numbers. And you're talking about ET in inches. Is that equivalent to rainfall inches or groundwater level inches, or
the same
height
as
of my granddaughter inches, or which?
no, it's the same as rainfall inches.
Okay, so we're basically, I mean, if we've been averaging, call it 44 inches of rain a year for the last 40 years, we've just basically been in balance with ET, is how I would read that chart then. Am I interpreting that correctly? Because it's hovering right around 45, right?
Right. No, you're right. ET is a big proportion. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments at this time of what Georgina has covered thus far? Gail, go ahead, please.
Yes, could we get some help from Sean, perhaps, and just telling us what the assumptions are? I want to say I agree with Jeff that, I think that the science, the thing we know for sure is that it's going to get hotter. And that's probably one of the easier things to predict. The other thing we know is that the rain will come in bigger but less frequent storms, and both of those will lead to less recharge. But the thing that is the least certain is the effect on rainfall. And the things that I've seen are similar to what Jeff said, is that some say there's a little bit less, some say it's about the same, some say it's a little bit more. So it just seems dangerous to me to put so much of the emphasis on what is really a very low value. And so I would also like to hear from Sean what he's used for his prediction of temperature rise.
Okay, Sean, you here?
I am here. I can shed a little light on the history of where the projection came from, and hopefully that helps. First, though, just to tackle the last question there, Gail, we did not, this isn't a temperature record that we came up with. This was a temperature record like the precipitation record that was published along with many other projections at the time that the state of California made available for public use back in 2011, roughly. And we're looking at a few cycles old of climate projections. So this came out with what's called the Coupled Model Intercomparison Phase 3 project. So this is why we go back roughly 9 or 10 years when this work started. At the time, the way that the projections were downscaled spatially to more local areas was known to be subject to overestimating precipitation. So if you took the climate models and you actually tried to simulate historical precipitation patterns and magnitudes, what scientists generally saw is that spatial downscaling would result in larger precipitation values than what we could observe in the historical records. So based on that knowledge, the team that we worked with at the time re-downscaled essentially the air temperature and precipitation records following a standard called the delta downscaling, which was widely used at that time. And it's nothing more than using historical averages relative to projected values to essentially reapportion any projected values of precip and temperature. When you do that here, the offshoot is that the precip comes out quite dry. This was in response, and I think Doug can speak to this as well, to somewhat of a desire to have a possible worst case scenario to work from. This should not be interpreted as the worst case, right? Because no one can tell us what the worst case is, but it's probably part of a set of projections that we could consider to be pretty dire in terms of precipitation. So anyways, this projection was used back in 2000.
You still didn't
Yep.
answer my question about what scenario in terms of CO2 rise are you using in terms of predictions of increase in temperature? And certainly the science has come a long way since 9 or 11 years ago.
So I apologize. I actually didn't hear you ask for the emission scenario that we used at the time. That projection reflects the worst case emission scenario with the CMIP3 data set. The A2. A2 is a fairly drastic emission scenario that came out of CMIP3.
So you want to explain what that number means in terms of temperature rise to the rest of the board?
Temperature rise. Well, Georgina showed you the effect of it on evapotranspiration. The temperature rise is fairly strong. It's not as strong as some temperature rises that they project today using updated model simulations, but at the time it was quite warm. And this is why we see the potential evapotranspiration line trend up quite strongly that she showed on a few diagrams ago. So the A2, yep, go ahead.
I guess I would like for somebody to report back to the board what numbers were used and how those compare to best estimates. And let's not waste any more time on that now.
Okay, so as an action item, we need to double back around then to the question that Gail has just raised. So Nick, let's please get that memorialized. In the queue is Chris and then Mark.
Yes, Georgina, Doug brought up an interesting point, just out of curiosity. the graph that shows the evapotranspiration, if historically evapotranspiration is responsible for as many inches of, rain use as what it's raining, doesn't that, I mean, I know I'm probably missing something really big here, but doesn't that mean we're getting zero use of the rainwater? That the plants are using all the rainwater?
Just about, but again, this is Sean reminded me that this is actually potential evapotranspiration. It's an empirical calculation. The model actually, if you remember all those water budget slides, I gave you a water budget for the whole basin, and in that, and I don't remember the numbers exactly, but there is the amount of precipitation, evapotranspiration, recharge and runoff is included in there. So looking at this again, I potential evapotranspiration isn't actual evapotranspiration. Those are actually two different terms in this climate stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, let's go. Sorry, I'm sitting here going, let's go to Mark, please. And then I'm like, yeah, you may be muted, Mark. And I was realizing, oh, wait, I'm muted.
I see. Okay. All right. Thanks, Dave. Georgina, you made a comment, I think, that you were using the worst case scenario for the climate model. And I can understand wanting to know what the worst case is, but did you model anything at a less than worst case, but still conservative in an effort to, kind of following along with what Jeff Koopman was saying with, and how does that then affect what we might be doing as far as any mitigation measures down the line?
Yeah, that's really good question, because that's what we are going to be discussing. That's exactly what I want us to talk about, is that there are other options available for that. And in the neighboring basin, the Santa Cruz Mid-County Basin, they used a different kind of climate projection there. That's something that we could use as well. And we've had some initial discussions about how we could implement that into this model. But given the time it takes that we have to prepare for each of these meetings, this is as much as we could get in and present to you. So I didn't want to give you nothing. I wanted to at least tell you what and tell you the truth. This is what what our results were, and then discuss about next steps that we'll be taking.
So in the queue, we have Jeff. And again, I think if I'm not mistaken, Georgina, and again, as a reminder, the use of the scenario that was decided upon here was not an arbitrary decision by Montgomery. This was a decision that the board came to. Am I correct in my recollection of that, Georgina?
Well, I think it was more, we presented to the board that this is the scenario we would be using, and there was no objection at that point.
All right. So the point that you were, I think, alluding to then, Mark, is, and as Georgina said, is really exactly where we need to get to here in the discussion. So let's go to Jeff, and then let's continue the presentation and see if we can pivot to the, okay, so what are we going to do discussion. Jeff, go ahead.
I'll hold off on my comments for now.
Okay. Sean, again, go. I see your comment, but go ahead, and I would appreciate you to go ahead and speak it verbally, and then we're going to continue on.
Sure thing. I just took a look at the GFDL 2.1A2 projection. To get to Gail's question, on average, the projection provides a roughly 1.5 to 1.6 degree increase in degrees Celsius of air temperature when we compare the projection period to the historic period or the historical period 1951 to 1999 as measured at the Santa Cruz weather station presently operated in the CIMIS network.
Okay, thank you. All right, Georgina, let's go ahead and continue and move ourselves on into the conversation.
Okay, so this is a summary of the 3 scenarios that we ran, and I have gone through this towards the end of last year with you as well. But the 3 scenarios are an aquifer storage and recovery scenario where we inject water into the Lompico aquifer of about, on average, 820 acre-feet per year is injected in the South Scotts Valley area, and then 90% is pumped out and recovered, and 10% is left in the basin. And this was trying to be consistent with previous modeling that had been done, but that was a different schedule, whereas they would only recover their water when they really needed it on very dry years instead of every single year. So it was a slightly different operation of that ASR program. The second scenario was injection only, where 710 acre-feet is injected into the Lompico aquifer and it's left there, and that happens in central Scotts Valley. I'm going to show you some maps coming up here where these are, because where they are, where these projects are, influences what happens in the basin and how it happens. The third scenario is an in-lieu recharge one, where an average of 720 acre-feet of excess surface water is used in lieu of winter pumping by San Lorenzo Valley Water District and also supplied to Scotts Valley Water District during winter. Okay, so the next slide is showing you where the ASR would happen. It's in this area just east of Hanson Quarry, and there'd be, I think, 9 injection wells injecting into this area. And then, and I've told you everything else that's on this slide. They would only pump out 90%. Okay, so that's where that happens over here. The injection only scenario is in the central part, more central part of Scotts Valley, and there would be 3 injection wells in the El Pueblo yard area. That's Scotts Valley Water District's yard, and that amount of water would be pumped uniformly, that 710 uniformly over all the months. It's not seasonal. It's the same amount every month. The third one is much more complicated. I'm not going to go into great detail about this because it's a very rough assumption of how this would work. If this was a project, San Lorenzo and whoever is involved is going to have to do a lot more looking into whether these sources of water are truly available. And again, a lot of this, because it relies on surface water, is all related to the climate projection that we use. So in this case, there is surface water is used in lieu of San Lorenzo Valley Water District and Scotts Valley Water District pumping from their wells. These are the wells circled that they would pump from. And this starts in 2025. But they would use surface water in the winter instead of pumping groundwater. So that groundwater is called in-lieu recharge because it remains in the ground. And that water, that excess water would come from Loch Lomond. The San Lorenzo is has the kind of entitled to entitled, I don't know if that's the right word, but they have an agreement that they get 313 acre-feet per year from water stored in Loch Lomond. They haven't used that because they don't have a means to transmit that at the moment. But this assumption, I mean, this scenario assumes that they do, okay? And then there would be excess surface water. They have some diversions off the map over here in their north system that would, they would take whatever was available in wet years. And then there would also be down here in their Felton system, these little wagon wheels are the diversion, or some of the diversion points. They would take excess water there, but there are water rights issues about how much they can take, and we try to honor those in setting this scenario up. But regardless, a lot of this is probably wrong, but what we did is we reduced pumping in these wells over here in the winter. And so the results you see are because pumping has stopped in quite a few locations in the basin. So this is very different to the other two scenarios where the action or the thing that was happening was very focused in one area. Okay, and this has implications for how the basin responds. Okay. So in the full presentation, there's lots of charts and tables, but I'm just gonna, like I said, I want to get to the main story here. And we're going to look at the cumulative change in storage. So this is kind of like if you had a well in the basin and this was its groundwater level, and this was, say, surface, the ground surface, it's not the ground surface, but this is, it's higher up in the well, and this is groundwater levels, you know, falling down in this direction. And there are four of these charts. This is one for the whole basin. And the lines that you see here are, the red line is the baseline condition. So if we did no projects, but it includes this this very dry climate projection. The lime green is the ASR. The blue is injection only scenario, and then the green is the in lieu recharge scenario. And as you can see, as Jeff was pointing out, you know, nothing you can do can stop this decline, and this is not sustainable. But this is totally, like, it is totally driven by the climate, and so it is hard to see what the impacts of these projects are on the basin in terms of improving it, because it doesn't improve it because of the climate. But you can still, this is still useful information, because we can evaluate the effects of these projects against each other. No matter what climate we used here, the results, the differences between these would all be very similar to this. So what we can see here is that the ASR, because it is putting water in and taking it out in the same year and only leaving 10%, it only has a very little improvement over baseline conditions. Now the injection only, that improves things, and these projects kind of come on here in 2025, I think, just about all of them, and that's why you see this divergence happen here. It does better, but it still, you know, doesn't reverse the trend. And then you have the in lieu, which is got a similar volume of water, but it has a greater benefit to the basin. You know, it's the losses of storage are less, and this is really because of those wells that the in lieu recharge is happening in are more spread out across the basin. Okay, so that's that result. But now I'm also going to show you the same kind of chart, but for each of the 3 sub areas that we have, and there's a little map on here on each of these to show you where that sub area is. So this is the area of the greatest groundwater level declines in the basin, the South Scotts Valley area. And you can see that if we did nothing, the red line shows there'd be about 14,000 acre-feet of loss of groundwater in storage. And then the other projects, you know, in the same order that I just described, it has some benefit. It has quite a good benefit compared to if you did nothing. You drop your, or you have about 6,000 acre-feet less losses of storage. But this is this one here is the in lieu recharge. Yeah. So it's amazing to think that if you just pump these wells over the winter period, you get a greater benefit than if you just purely inject virtually the same amount of water every year into the ground and leave it there. I mean, and the cost between these two is it's much cheaper to do in lieu than to do the injection. I'm not an expert in cost benefit analysis. We do have someone looking into that, as I mentioned earlier. So we'll be getting some numbers to verify that. But that's just my first take on it. Is that. So I'm going to look at these other sub areas. The North Scots Valley area, it has less of a loss of storage. And again, the injection and the in lieu are very, very similar here. And the ASR is a very small impact to the benefit to the basin and up so far north of where the injection is happening. And interestingly, this area here, north of Bean Creek, it has the greatest loss of storage, even greater than south of Bean Creek. Well, one, it's not having any projects happen here. So, and it's also because it's such a big area. So if you have such a big area and you have a drop of groundwater levels, when you translate that to the loss of storage, it's very big because this is a big area. And so you do still see this decline in storage. And because it's, fairly, it's the other side of Bean Creek, there is less of a benefit to the basin from what's happening in the South Scots Valley area, which is, totally reasonable. That's what you would expect. There is movement of groundwater that you inject into this area over here, south of Bean Creek. The groundwater movement in the Lompico is kind of north, and then it comes out into San Lorenzo over here. So there is movement across Bean Creek into the Lompico on the other side, and which is why you do see this improvement even on this side of the basin. Okay, I'm going to stop there and see if folks have questions.
Okay, so we have in the queue Jeff and then Ruth. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, I'm delighted that the in lieu has such great performance. It's really wonderful to see. I want to comment that the in lieu has really almost zero capital costs compared to like the injection, which is a hugely expensive project. And it also has no ongoing, it has much lower ongoing pumping costs, electricity costs. You don't have to put the water in under high pressure. You don't have to treat the water before it goes in the ground. There's wonderful, it's a very economical, cheap way, and it's got the best performance here in these results. So the in lieu looks wonderful. I'm really happy to see that. Lowest carbon footprint, I think I mentioned that too. And a question I have is, and I suspect what the answer is that if we were looking at normal years here, then in normal years, in lieu would actually have more opportunity for reducing pumping, because in lieu can only pump when there's surface water available under certain restrictions. So if we had normal years plotted on these graphs, in lieu would have actually additional amounts of time that it could be resting those pumps, and the rate of increase in storage would be even steeper. Do you agree with that, Georgina?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Ruth and then to Dale.
I was also looking at the seasonality of this, and what would happen, does the model adjust for, say, a January like we just had, where most of the month there was not water available to either pump into ASR or to rest the wells?
Yeah, unfortunately, the model time step is on a monthly basis, so it's looking at a month. And I have to tell you, there's so many cells in this model and so many layers, it takes 36 hours to run each model run. And if we were to make it to a daily time step, it would take weeks. So unfortunately, when you do a model like this, and I know everyone is so interested in the timing of climate change, and people can do very specific models, when it comes to this basin-wide groundwater modeling for groundwater management purposes, generally we stick to a monthly time step. But I agree, it would be very interesting to see what happens.
So I think the bigger question is, does the model reflect the fact that there's going to be big storms and longer spaces between them?
It will if they're months apart. Individual events. No, it's taking all of that and lumping it into 1 month.
Okay.
So no, it can't. And it will obviously on an annual basis, like what you're seeing here is plotted annually. And so, when it's a wet year, which is these blue lines here, you do see that increase happen. But yeah, not to the smaller scale you're talking about.
Thank you.
Dale, go ahead, please.
Georgina, just curious, have you considered where the water's coming from that you would be injecting?
No, well, the agencies have ideas, and they're always thinking of ways to augment their water supplies, make them more resilient and back up and all of that. And so, I think that we have had that bit of a discussion about that. There are possible sources of advanced treated wastewater. There is excess surface water that can be injected. That's the ASR is a project that the city of Santa Cruz is considering and is piloting already. Some of that in mid-county is to take excess surface water, treat it, and inject it. So those are the two sources of water that people are looking at.
All right, thank you. Let's go back to Jeff and then continue on with the presentation, perhaps.
Yeah, just one correction. I slightly misspoke when I said that in lieu has no capital cost, because if San Lorenzo Valley does create a treatment plant for the Loch Lomond water, then that would incur a capital cost. So anyways, that's a correction. There depends on where you get the surface water from. But the other thing I wanted to mention was on the rainfall issue, it's really a conundrum, because it's true that the rainfall is going to fall in more intense periods, and okay, theoretically you'll get more runoff, but it's also in some ways convenient that it falls in smaller, more compact packets, because we have higher evapotranspiration. So if what we historically had was a lot of days of light rainfall, which in the future will evaporate away before it gets in the ground. But in the future, we won't have so many of those light rainfalls. We're going to have more of the fire hose rainfalls that are occurring. And the question is how much of that will get in the ground, which I don't think we really know. So it's kind of a big question mark in that ways going forward.
Well, usually when you have high intensity, you have greater runoff. So that's where it's accommodated.
All right, let's continue then, Georgina, with the presentation.
Great. Okay. So now these are really hard to see, and I apologize, and we have to put them all on the same scale. Otherwise, one well might look like it's got huge change of groundwater levels and another well doesn't. So anyway, what you're going to have to all put your faces up like I'm going to have to on this screen. And here we're showing the hydrographs of which is groundwater levels, how they respond. And these are some of the representative monitoring points that we've already put in some minimum thresholds for. These are ones in the Santa Margarita aquifer, and there's a dashed black line that is the ground surface, and then there's a dashed red line that is the minimum threshold. That is something we don't really want to go below. So now in the Quail Hollow area, which is out, there's a little map here with a speck to show where that well is. We pretty much stay above the dashed red line. So we're above minimum thresholds. That's good. Even with this climate change that's been included in these model runs. This is a representative monitoring point for surface water that is just south of Bean Creek. And in this case, we do get it going below, in the very dry years, we do get it going below the minimum threshold. Again, I think if we had a different climate change scenario, no matter what different climate change scenario we'd have, it would be different. And if it's a wetter one, it obviously will be up high. Still not sure, what that would actually look like until we run it. This is a well up north, Santa Margarita monitoring well up further north, and it is almost always below the minimum threshold there. But these are based off that climate change scenario. This one is down near Sky Park, I think, and this one is below minimum thresholds. When we get to Lompico, there are the bigger changes that you see in the Santa Margarita. All those 4 lines were on top of each other. It actually wasn't just one line. They were all the 4, the baseline and ASR injection only and the in lieu were all kind of plotted on the top of each other, because all the projects that we have modeled have all been injecting or all focused in on the Lompico aquifer. So here we have the Lompico aquifer, and you see the different colored lines here showing the different groundwater elevations that would result in each of these different scenarios. So the baseline again is red, and here it looks like the biggest impact to recharge when you have such little rainfall is really in the Lompico. That's where you are seeing the biggest changes. The Santa Margarita is right above. It's right, it receives rainfall, it fills up, and a lot of that water goes straight to the streams, and it doesn't get down deeper into the Lompico. Lompico, again, it's got very little surface exposure, and so it doesn't get much direct recharge that way. And so you can see that's why groundwater levels fall in the same way that those charts I showed you of storage. And again, this is just showing, this is actually an interesting one that you see the big fluctuations. This is one of a well that is very close to the ASR injection well, and you can see that it goes, the groundwater levels go way up when they're injecting, and then when they extract, they go way down, and that is below the minimum thresholds here. They all, this is a well up north again, and even though the injection is happening just south of that, it does improve the groundwater levels up in this northern Scotts Valley area. And this is right at the injection. You're getting about 75-foot increase in groundwater levels at that injection well, very close to it. So anyway, I just put these in out of interest. There were a lot more before. I'm glad we've blown by those. And I'm just to summarize those 3 model scenarios is that there were several injection sites in the ASR, which is the one near Hanson Quarry, where the groundwater levels actually, you saw those lime green lines fluctuating a lot. But some of them actually go above the ground surfaces, because it's close to Bean Creek and groundwater levels are higher there, so they would have to be moved in. This is all part of the when they start looking into really the feasibility of a project like this. This is the in-depth kind of stuff they need to look at. What we're doing here for this modeling is not modeling for like this is going to be the project. We're just looking at the effects that these types of actions might have on the basin, so that will help us to determine, a path forward. And I have a slide coming up that's going to talk a bit more about that. Also, at the end of the simulation period of the aquifer storage and recovery, there really isn't much of a change to from baseline conditions. So there's little increase in net groundwater contributions to Bean Creek. The injection only scenario it raises groundwater levels up to 75 feet, like I just showed you in that hydrograph, but that's just at the location where the injection's happening. Up to the north, there was also a little bit of it wasn't 75 feet, it might have been 25, 50 feet, but south of the injection site, there isn't as much of an increase in groundwater levels. And then there is there is some increase in net groundwater contribution to Bean Creek base flow from groundwater. The in lieu recharge scenario with its more widespread in lieu recharge locations, has a greater benefit than injection only. And it also does have a small increase in net groundwater contribution to Bean Creek. So I think I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has any other questions about those scenarios.
Okay, Dale's got a comment, and then we'll continue the floor open for any comments thus far. I do want to be cognizant of time, and Georgina, for you as well, that we do need to pivot, as best as I understand. We need to pivot this conversation into a what next discussion, because there are some compelling things that would appear that you need to get going on then to address the sort of untenable outcomes that we've seen thus far. But for right now, let's go to Dale and then we'll go to Chris.
Georgina, just curious, can you model two scenarios at once?
Oh, yes, we could. And yeah, that's a possibility for sure for other scenarios to do. Yes.
So you could do the injection and the in-lieu recharge to see,
Yes.
right, if that had a net positive effect overall.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, thanks.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Chris.
And just a quick question, how do you deal with the dry years with the in lieu? Are you still thinking that we get the water, even though it's, you know, barely raining the winter?
Yeah, there is still water available to do the in lieu, and we use the model results. It does simulate runoff, and so we looked at that. It's not perfect by any means, but it's some indication of what would be available, and we use that. I mean, the city of Santa Cruz, the amount of water being injected is based off the same calculations, and so that on their points of diversion. So there is water available even in those very dry years in the rivers.
I'm also talking about Loch Lomond. I don't know what the agreement is with San Lorenzo Valley, but even is it dry? You know what I mean? Level of the reservoir has no bearing on whether they can get 313 acre feet.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, no, and it's a good question, because I did ask Rosemary that, and we just made that assumption it was available every time. Yes.
Okay, great. That'd be great.
Go to Jack and then Doug.
Yes, I understood it right. The Loch Lomond would be providing part of the water for the in lieu. And I'm wondering if, I've heard that conceivably Loch Lomond might be expanded. And if it were, would that provide more in lieu water that would help our GSA more?
That's a question I can't answer. I don't know if someone from City of Santa Cruz can do that, but I'm sure if they were, yeah, I'm not going to, I have my opinion, I have my thoughts, but I'm not, I think I'll let someone more qualified answer that.
Okay, well, we have Doug in the queue, but Rosemary in an official capacity for the city.
Loch Lomond is not going to be expanded. Yeah, Loch Lomond's not going to be expanded. So no. As regards in lieu water availability, I mean, you know, we've looked at this quite a bit, obviously, in the modeling at Santa Cruz, and you know, you have to take into account the seasonality. So there is some variability that maybe the modeling that we're doing here doesn't quite reflect, and it attenuates the viability of it depending upon the direction your climate modeling takes you, and you know, the inherent seasonality. One question I have for you, Georgina, has to do with the flow modeling you did on the San Lorenzo and the takes you're modeling. Are those taking into account the posited water rights and HCP provisions that City of Santa Cruz is pursuing right now in order to preserve habitat on the river, or were you blind to that?
We were, I know that on Fall Creek, San Lorenzo has some obligations, and I thought those were linked to the HCP. I'm not sure if that's true. If that's not if that's not true, then we didn't. But we did, there's all sorts of flow requirements before they can divert on Fall Creek. And so we did take those into account.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there are definitely flow regimes that apply to the river, and yeah, I think Fall Creek is separate.
I can
if
maybe
we dig into this
help.
deeper, oh, great, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, so all the surface flow sets that we gave to Montgomery account for the HCP flow rules and how the reservoir is operated. Yeah, so you're correct.
Okay. Seeing nobody else in the queue, Georgina, let's continue, please.
Okay. We don't have very much left, but when we are going to be starting to talk here about other scenarios, all three of these scenarios have worsening groundwater conditions. I don't have to flog that horse again, and because of the rainfall. So if we were to stick with this scenario, with this climate projection, a much greater volume of water than 800 acre-feet is needed to stop that decline. And then, the declines happen throughout the basin, not only those areas where there has historically been lowering of groundwater levels. I mean, I don't really need to talk about this. It's kind of moot at this point. The next slide is talking more about focusing our discussion on the scenarios that need to be still need to be run or developed. Is that the project budget is we had 5 in total and we've done 3. We have 2 more, so it could be combinations of projects, it could be something else. And like I started to say earlier, these are not actual projects, but they're being used to figure out what volumes and methods of recharge benefit the basin the most, so that over the next 20 years, in order to, because that's how long it's going to we're given to achieve the sustainability in this basin, over those 20 years, what types of projects are the agencies really going to have to throw their money behind? And so we need to know that there is hope at the end of the tunnel, and that's what this modeling is trying to achieve. Now, when we use a climate projection that is so dry, I don't see that hope so much. But I think if we were to change that and then use some and then do some of these projects on top of that, I think that would have a better idea of what was achievable, because the current climate is we can't achieve sustainability using that. As a worst case, it could very possibly happen, but I think for now, for this first GSP, which no GSP is going to be perfect. You've heard me say this before. We need to just get going on improving groundwater levels in the basin, and these modeling scenarios are to help us do that. So I think that I'm going to leave it there. We have much to discuss, and I'm not sure how much time we have left, because there were other things on the agenda, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I mean, we always have a target of 8 o'clock, but in reality, I think it was all relatively understood that we might have to push past that. We do have Jeff and Doug in the queue. I'd like to go ahead and go to them at this time, and then I will point out that Sean has provided a bit of a lengthy comment there in the chat box, and then after that is Chris and Jack. So let's go to Jeff and then to Doug.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it would be interesting to see what a more generally accepted view of the climate's supposed to be around here would result in with running through our model. However, that said, I mean, I have to make a guess that it's going to be somewhere around maybe a little worse than we are today, since we're not really taking into account the evapotranspiration. We have some more evapotranspiration, but we're not taking into account the daily rainfall changes and things like that. I'm not sure that I would encourage us to move ahead right away and do that study. There's some stuff I would like to have us study, but I think we need a little bit more time to discuss that before we can just commit to it. Is there a requirement that we have to have these last two model runs that we're entitled to? They have to happen right away, or is there an opportunity for us to have a little bit of engagement and discussion about what kinds of things we'd like to study and in which way? Can we kick this down the road? Maybe, you know, a board meeting or two out. I mean, I don't think the GSP itself is going to change dramatically based on what we do, right? These are just studies, and these are possible actions that we might put in that GSP, which is due all the way out to the summer. So
Right.
it happen later in the spring that we come up with these results and decide which ones to put in the GSP.
You know, if it was, unfortunately, we haven't finished the sustainable management criteria yet. We haven't done measurable objectives and undesirable results because I wanted to see what was possible in the basin. I didn't want to set objectives that there was no way we could meet. And I wanted to see how much the climate change was going to affect groundwater levels with respect to the minimum thresholds. Now, I can't do that with the data that we have right now. So I think that we need another crack at the climate projection. And no, we don't have to do another 2 scenarios. That was what the budget was to develop them, because it takes some time to develop the data that goes into the model. And if the board thinks it doesn't need any others, and if we run the another projected climate against the 3 scenarios we've already done to see what that does, you know, we can have that probably ready by the next meeting. But I wanted to, in March, if you remember the roadmap, I wanted to come up with the minimum the measurable objectives and undesirable results based off the modeling at that in March. And it might seem that we have a lot of time, but we don't. We need a fully completed GSP at the end of July that you will say, what the board is going to say, can go out for public review. And that is really not very much time at all. So we're really up against it right now. Got to tell you, it's pretty stressful to have, like, there's lots of curveballs get thrown at me, and that this has happened the entire process, you know, but that's just the nature of this. This happens with every GSP. We have someone from DWR with us. Tom Berg is with us, and I'm sure he's heard this in all the meetings that he goes to. It's not an easy process. There are lots of regulations that tell us we have to do things a certain way. We have to include climate change. We should be using a groundwater model because we have to do water budgets. We have to do simulations. How else can you do it without a model? And all of this does take time. So, and you know, we try to squeeze it into the schedule that we have. So we're doing the best that we can, and it is, and you know, this is definitely a curveball thrown at us, but it's something that we can handle. And I really appreciate all of your comments. This helps us a lot.
Let me go to in the queue just to remind is Doug, and then Chris and Jack and Jeff, and just as a sort of sobering reminder to what Georgina just said, it is good to put in context that as of the completion of this meeting and in the context of everything you've discussed tonight and the things that Georgina has covered, you only have like 5 or 6 board meetings left before this GSP is to be finished. Doug, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Dave and Georgina. So I heard you say, and I hope we're not destroying anybody's plausible deniability here by having an open conversation about the conundrum we're in, but here we are. I understood you said that in the GSP, we need to take into account climate change using some regime or another. GFDL 2.1 has the characteristic of defining one part of the problem space, which is how we've used it historically. As it happens, I mean, Santa Cruz is moving to more current models for its work, but that's neither here nor there because we don't interact with groundwater. But my recollection is that Mid-County used what they called the climate catalog. I'll call it a scenario for climate change, and that did get plugged into groundwater models. So I guess my working hypothesis is that that might be something that we could incorporate with some alacrity. It doesn't necessarily represent best available science, but it's available science. And in 5 years, we're going to turn the crank anyway. And at that time, there will be new climate models we could plug in and review. So one part of my proposal for consideration is that we explore using the climate catalog scenario that Mid-County used. I'm curious whether we need actually to run combination scenarios or whether we can consider the different items you identified as the different PMAs you've identified as additive, simply additive, at least for face validity purposes. If that saves us some runs, then we could still run these same PMAs, and then we can kind of do the math and see how that works out on a go forward basis. And then I'd have one request, mindful that in lieu is a PMA we're considering here, that as part of what we report out San Lorenzo River flows modeled, I don't know, maybe at Felton, because the city needs to think about its water supplies downstream as well. And what we do up here may have an effect there. So if we can see those river flows, then we'll understand what's available for in lieu, and we'll understand what's available for folks downstream. So number one, climate catalog, mindful we've got a 5-year refresh coming. Number two, maybe just continue running the same PMAs if the math is as simple as I hope it is. And then number three, I'm requesting for consideration that we add San Lorenzo River flows as part of the outputs here that we report out. Doug out.
Thank you, Doug. So the historical climate catalog used the dry, warm years from the past historical record at Santa Cruz and Station, I should say, and we used a randomizer to come up with the sequence of years from those dry, warm, actual years of rainfall, and came up with a scenario that's about 10% drier than the historical rainfall. So that was used in Mid-County. Of course, no one can agree on climate. There were people in those meetings saying, "Oh, it needs to be much drier, much drier than this." We never actually did run a drier one. We just gave them this one, but I'm sure if we'd done that drier one, we would have got the same reaction we got tonight. So that is definitely a plausible thing for us to do. And Sean might be able to comment a little bit more on different options.
Well, wait, okay, hold on. Before we do that, I want to honor the members of the board that are in the queue. So I do think it's critical to go to Sean with that question, but we've got Chris and Jack and Jeff in the queue. Before I even go to there, I want to do a point of order with everybody. We are obviously just shy of 8 o'clock. I've checked in with Perrette offline. The remaining items on the agenda tonight, some of the administrative items, which are important, they have to get addressed. She expects to take about 20 minutes. We had generally expected, notwithstanding the 8 o'clock time, that we were thinking probably the meeting tonight was going to be going till at least 8:30. So I think, we've got this what to do next question that we have to more than likely get resolved tonight. So I need to know, is there a prohibition for any board members to extend to potentially 9 o'clock tonight? And if so, go ahead and just, put that in the chat so I can get a sense of whether we're going to lose quorum. And so with that, like I said, just do that on the chat. And in the meantime, let's go to Chris and then Jack and then Jeff, and then we'll circle back around to Georgina's question that she wanted to pose to Sean.
Georgina, I don't see like combination projects, right? So let's say you took the entire in lieu project, and let's say we do that, but let's say you also did a advanced treatment in addition to in lieu, and we got advanced treatment water either from, somewhere in Santa Cruz, or we got water that's advanced treatable brought up from somewhere in Santa Cruz. And then in the present scenario, that could be used as indirect potable reuse. And in a future scenario, it could be direct potable reuse, depending on how the regulations and the technology changes, because that would be a level of resiliency that would step beyond just, as good as the in lieu or as superior as they are side by side. It would seem together that they would, get a whole nother level of resiliency. And it's probably an easy way to look at that, since we have kind of running them both, even if you just went with the I think it was 800 acre feet of advanced treatment, the injection only scenario, and combine that with an in lieu scenario.
Right. And yeah, and we had that suggestion earlier, and I said it was a good one. And then I did want to finish off with Doug's question about, could you avoid having a combined one by just looking at it, adding the effects of the individual ones together. And unfortunately, definitely in this basin, we can't, because the more you raise groundwater level, there is this outflowing to the streams that needs to be accounted for. And how high you raise groundwater levels is not linear or additive. It's, it's something that's you need to take into account the actual groundwater level increases. Well, the model does that we don't do that, but it's all in the calculation. So they do have to be run together. And so we can't avoid that. These cumulative projects, I kind of call them that, cumulative impacts from multiple projects like that. So yes, we could do that, Chris. That is something we could.
And is that what you said, Doug? If you said that, you sure do talk fancy. Because I didn't. If I just repeated what you said, I apologize.
She's a silver-tongued devil, let me say. She can always put words in my mouth.
Well, Doug already used alacrity tonight, so he clearly is throwing down. So. Yeah.
I thought he was out though.
Yeah. He didn't say mic drop. He just said out. Okay. Jack, go ahead. Or Chris, were you done? I'm sorry. Okay, Jack, go ahead.
Yes, I recall the public workshop that we had in Felton, and I remember, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I remember the presentation about climate change, and I remember hearing there were a whole number of climate change studies with different assumptions and different conclusions, but that it was a guess. And in terms of clearly it was going to get hotter, and but how much was a real question mark. So I'm wondering if there are credible studies or out there that do show that I don't want to just go with the most advantageous one or the riskiest one, depending on your perspective, but is there a credible one that we could get behind that it's just a scientific that would favor us in terms of assuming, and I'm careful I say that because I don't want us to run dry, but if one study is just as credible as another, I'd sure rather take a study in account before we move too far ahead that might assume more rainfall or assume a lesser temperature change increase or something along those lines. So is there a way of identifying what I'll call a credible study that would prevent us from going too far, recognizing we're still in the preliminary stages?
Again, I'm going to defer that answer to Sean, who is part of our team as the climate expert there. And then when he does reply, when we respond, if he could talk about the DWR has come out to assist people with this difficult question of climate change, and they have some projections that can be used, and why this might not apply in this area. So Dave, can Sean talk now about this?
Let's go ahead, because it may in fact address some of the other questions that are queued up as well. So Sean, can you go ahead and speak to some of these options that might be available?
Sure thing. Presently, the state of California puts forth 10 different climate projections that organizations can use to make planning decisions. The website I sent around in the chat, which I'll follow up with Nick on, allows you to view all 10 of those projections, their maximum air temperature records, their minimum air temperature records, and their precipitation records. As far, from just speaking bluntly, you all can choose any of those 10 that you want to choose from. The difficulty would be in choosing precisely which one you would like to choose, and this is always the difficulty. So when we were getting started in this work more than a decade ago at the city, we originally went one route and chose GFDL 2.182 because at the time there were only a couple models that we could choose from, and things have come a long way in the last decade. As Doug mentioned, the city has ramped things up. We have a few other projections that we can use, but essentially you all can decide to use any projection that you want, and that website will show you the 10 that the state of California recommends that people consider. You'll see when you look at those projections that there's a wide range of variability in the projected conditions. They all agree that air temperatures will increase and some are warmer than others. The conundrum comes in precipitation. There's significant variation. And so it is not a straightforward decision-making process to choose one of those. Sometimes organizations will take a statistical approach where you combine, say, these 10 projections into a very large sample, and you randomly choose from that sample. This is something that we've done with the city of Santa Cruz 4 years ago to produce a different projection. The historical climate catalog is not too different from that approach. It's just using historical information. So there is a range of information. The link I sent you provides some possibilities there. In terms of the DWR comment, the thing simply there to recognize is, for the city's sake, we were very interested in river flows because of the HCP. When we tried to use DWR's projections of stream flow in the streams that the city withdraws water from, what we immediately noted is that there is far more water in the DWR projections than what we understand to be the case. And so, we decided not to use their projections of stream flow in our process with the city. So that's the DWR end. It's separate from precip. What you're getting from them in that case is their application of precipitation and air temperature trends through a model that they constructed to develop estimates of stream flow. And the only reason that is because their model is well suited for much larger basins than the basins we typically deal with in the Santa Cruz region.
All right, thank you very much, Sean. Let's go to Jeff, and then we've got other folks in the queue, but I'm gonna actually have a more of like a policy question that I want to throw to Sierra. Let me throw the question out, and then Sierra will give you a chance to either think about what your answer is or suddenly have a reason to not be on the call anymore. The policy question that I have for you is, Doug spoke earlier about, we, as a reminder to everybody, every 5 years you sort of get to turn the crank again. And I had a similar discussion with Georgina the other day as we were preparing for tonight. And, relevant to what Sean was just saying, it seems that, the conundrum is there is no real right answer. DWR doesn't have a right answer. They obviously have a multitude of models that are available, but there's a policy reality that if you sort of go with a scenario that sort of ends up being dead on arrival, you sort of put like a big screaming neon sign over your head upon which everything else is sort of failing in your GSP. And so from a policy perspective, knowing that you get to revisit in 5 years, the thing I'd like you to be thinking about, Sarah, because I know you've done a lot of work with DWR in the last couple of years, is, you know, what's that again, I'm gonna use the term sweet spot. What's that sweet spot that can sort of keep you in the black, so to speak, as a means? And I know it sort of sounds like you're reverse engineering into a scenario, but maybe that's the case. But, you know, what's that sweet spot that you get to do where you don't put a big neon sign over your head and get undue attention where it's not necessary, and still leaving yourself the capacity to reiterate on at least a 5-year basis, if not? And what's your sense of where DWR stands on things like that, given all of these uncertainties? That's what I want you to think about, Sarah. Meanwhile, I'm going to go back into the queue. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah. So from what I heard a while back from Georgina was that she kind of needs to have something to write the GSP, move forward on the writing in the GSP about. And I'd really like to save one of our model runs for some stuff that I'd like to propose that we don't have time to do yet. But if we did a model run that had a more nominal precipitation, you know, from the list of the ones that are available, one of the more average outcomes that the many different predictions have kind of a preponderance and a center. And if we chose something that was kind of mid-level in there as a likely one that was going to happen in the future, and we did a model run with that, and then we used in lieu, but not with San Lorenzo Valley necessarily having to create a water treatment plant. So they would only give us surface water that was available from maybe other sources, if we could, you know, get those available and licensed to be able to move over. Because there's more nominal precipitation pattern, those other sources might have more water in them and might allow for that in lieu to do just enough to actually start lifting our numbers up, even though there's a little bit higher evapotranspiration. So it's kind of a combination that would get us kind of like, without spending money, it would be a baseline with a minimum investment. Does that work? Or does that look like a scenario that would pan out? And if so, if it looks like it gently rises to the Lompico level, could we then write our GSP to that? And that would be the run I would promote that we would do, and then keep one in the piggy bank for maybe a few more bells and whistles that I'd like to throw in, or maybe we could throw in.
Okay. Is there an immediate response to either from Sean or Georgina to what Jeff just threw out? Otherwise, I'm going to continue with the queue.
Yeah, I have one response. The response would be you could use the updated GFDL, so you're comparing the same model against one another, and its updated output is slightly wetter than historical, and its air temperature trend is warm, but the benefit there is you're comparing results generated from the same model framework. So you're reducing your bias in your interpretations.
Okay, thank you. Let's, in the queue, I'm jumping down now. Let's go to Ruth, then Dale, then Manu, and then, yeah, we'll go there. And then there's a few other people in the queue, but we'll start with Ruth. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, I'd like to suggest that we let the professionals choose the model and give them some direction. And my direction would be to choose a moderate to conservative choice, because we're wanting to prepare for worst case. I guess we've seen worst case scenarios. Let's go for generally bad case scenarios and see what it comes out of it. But I think that they are much more qualified to choose a good model than for all of us to start advising them. I don't know the cost of more model runs, but I think more information is probably worth paying for. So I would suggest at this point we do a model run with the moderate version of their choice, with a combo project, as well as a whatever it is, with San Lorenzo sharing water and the injection. I think the ASR is not this model run showed that it doesn't have enough. It doesn't have enough of a benefit to use one of our model runs for running it again. And then in 5 years, when we get to ground truth it, when we know a bit more. So that's it from me.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to Dale and then Manu, like I had said, I wanted to give Sierra some opportunity to think about that. And I went to Sierra because, like I said, Sierra's been doing a lot of work over the last year or so in terms of relationship building and relationship conversations with DWR. And so I'm putting her on the spot because I felt that she may have some policy level sense of along maybe perhaps the same lines of what Ruth was just going to. So Sierra, have you had a chance to think about the question I posed you?
Yeah, I have. It's not something that we haven't already been thinking about, but in terms of having a target on our back by putting out a situation that is really unsuitable, it's not just DWR that's actually my concern. It's they understand that this is all we're working as fast as we can with what we have the best available science available to us at the time, and that is going to change dramatically in 5 years as we have been focusing more time and money and long-term monitoring in the basin. So I definitely think that we would be raising some concerns by putting something out there that is not, really not suitable. But it's not just them. There are other people who are reviewing these documents. It's the wildlife agencies, for one. It's third-party environmental organizations that we also need to be considering what we're putting out there in these documents and who else is going to see them and what they're going to say. And I think it's important that when we're choosing these scenarios, we are keeping all of that in mind, that we do need to be cognizant that it's DWR and it's our relationship with them, and it's also our relationship with other partners in the state and federal agencies. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I had no preconception of what you would say. I know that you've been looking at this from a broader policy perspective, and you just did that. That's just what I was wanting you to get the mix on. Let's go to Dale and then Manu, and then there's a few other folks that are in the queue below that, but Dale and then Manu.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I'm going to say has already been said, but I want to go on record to be in support of another model run that would have a climate scenario that maybe wasn't quite as dire and but was credible and reasonable, defensible. Something that we could that would be applicable. And also, I think it would be wise to run a double scenario with model with two different scenarios. Just to see what effect that would have. Yeah, I would be supporting that.
All right, thank you. Manu, go ahead.
I would like to second Dale's suggestion. I just want to point out in general, I feel like there's a bit of a frustrating lack of process here. We're going around in circles, and we haven't really, we've had a couple suggestions thrown out, and I don't know if we have, Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Procedure established as the way this organization is going to run, but we've had some good suggestions. I want to second Dale's suggestion, and I believe it was for a second model run with a slightly less dire scenario, but one that's still defensible.
Okay, thank you. With regards to your process question, what I'm trying to do as facilitator is to accommodate the range of feedback that's queued up by various participants, board members, and then my intent was to then circle back around to Georgina and Sean as technical specialists and consultants to let them summarize what they've been hearing and then basically consolidate that back to a proposal back to the board as to, based on what they're hearing, what they would propose as the specialists along the lines of what Ruth is saying. But I don't want to prohibit or limit the ability of any board member to come forward with a proposal. So it's my obligation to be honoring everybody that's in the queue.
Okay.
And then
So I'm hearing you're saying that we're not going to take a roll call vote on that. Then the other, I have a point of information.
We can't actually do that because from an action perspective in a Brown Act dynamic, because that action wasn't actually noticed under Brown Act, you can't actually take a formal Brown Act based action without it having been noticed in the agenda in advance. So it needs to take the form of sort of a, yeah, we think that's a good idea, without taking it as a formal action, because it wasn't agendized as such.
All right, well, maybe that's part of the issue, is we need to agendize, a decision on what model we're going to use, and et cetera. Then I have a point of information, a question, which is, are we expecting to see a cost benefit analysis of the proposed projects at the next meeting? And is the current proposal to see for the 3 mentioned projects or the 5 projects total?
Georgina, can you respond to that from a GSP schedule perspective and information perspective?
Right. Yeah. In March, we are hoping to bring cost benefit analysis for not only these projects, but a slew of other projects as well that are on a list that we have generated for the GSP. So these ones are the most likely ones. They're higher priority, but we are also looking at other ones as well. And Sierra is kind of leading that to some respect, I'd say. Well, she's not doing the cost benefit analysis, but she has been involved in coming up with all the list of projects and prioritizing them. Yeah.
Great, that's fantastic. I think it's essential that we see the cost benefit on as many projects as possible, as soon as possible. And I think, ultimately we're going to have to consider that, we're doing one or more projects, likely some combination of projects. And depending on whether the climate model is more or less dire, doing more or less projects to meet the needs. So I'm glad we'll see these projects at the next meeting, and hopefully another climate model as well. I would also like to add one other suggestion, since that's how we're doing this, is that in the future we at least take care of the business of the meeting, the things that we have to do, like approve the annual financial report and minutes, et cetera, at the beginning of the meeting, so that we can be a little bit more focused in our conversation at the end and not continually run over the time.
Duly noted. I will say, ironically, that this meeting today was purposely restructured. Historically, that's what has been done, and the decision was made for tonight's agenda to do the opposite, so that these focused technical discussions got front loaded. So it actually was already switched that way around. So this is a conundrum of that continues to happen regarding what gets prioritized.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to Rosemary. There's a question for Sean, and then Sierra. I don't know if you've still got a question pending, but let's go to Sierra, or let's go to Rosemary, and then Sierra, and then continue on and see if we can get to a point or near a point of closure here of what I said, which was getting back to Georgina and Sean with sort of a next steps proposal. Rosemary, go ahead.
I just had a brief question for Sean, and it was asking him to maybe describe briefly the steps to take some model and get it to the point where it can be used in the modeling work we're doing here. Because I think that the earlier suggestion about the climate catalog, and actually the fact that we're using the GFDL 2.1, were both already sort of set up to be put into these kind of modeling things. But I'm just wondering to know that if somebody wants to go up in a different direction, what's involved in making that work?
Sure, that's a great question. I'd say, sparing people the details, it's approximately a week's worth of my time, perhaps 2 weeks, and then there's a couple weeks of back and forth between Gary Fisk and myself in order to essentially achieve a water supply model output that's stable And then once Gary is finished, he has a little more analysis. I can't speak to exactly how long it takes, but for him to produce the flow set that we ultimately then can feed in part to Montgomery to feed into the groundwater model. So this stuff it's not plug and turn and plop it in the next day. There's legwork that has to be done to produce the data sets that Montgomery can use in the groundwater model.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
So I just wanted to let Supervisor Koenig know that there is a project list. The last time it was presented to this board was September 24th. And so if you go, you can find that list on the archive board meetings. That was all.
All right, there.
Thank you.
Let's go to Chris and then Gail, and then I'm going to be looking to Georgina to begin the process of sort of moving us to potential conclusions here. Go ahead, Chris.
I would just recommend what Sean had suggested is there was a climate scenario that is somehow closely linked with what we're doing from a technical standpoint, and it showed a slightly wetter scenario than we currently have, and it just seems like there was some savability there in inputting that into another look at this. So I think that sounds like a good idea to me, just from a ease of use, and it's going to be a little more, rain friendly, let's say. And we'll have, between the two, we'll see which way the worst and the best case can be.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Gail.
Yeah, partly to follow on from what Chris said and Sean and Jeff is I think we definitely want to stay with the DFCL because we don't want to waste the previous runs. We want to make things that are comparable. So I think the idea of going with this updated version that has rainfall, it's if anything a little bit wetter. I would also like to see a temperature increase that is more realistic than what we ran, which the 1.5, nobody believes that anymore. I think everybody believes that we're pretty much locked into 2 or 3. So you've got to run the RCP 4.5 is even kind of hopeful at 2 degrees, and maybe you need to run the RCP 8. So something at least 3 degrees, I think, is what is more realistic than 1.5. And I like the idea of the combined one. I think the one thing that was wonderful to learn, for me anyway, was that we can eliminate one of the things that we were thinking about doing. And I like the idea that we heard about having the combined, looking at both injection and in lieu as one possibility. And then Jeff, I thought, had a really interesting idea, partly because it would be the cheapest one, it'd be the easiest one to implement, and it'd be sort of a way that we could see how well they work and then when we cost them out, which is just to use the water that we already have in San Lorenzo Valley Water District from our existing things, because it's not just to use the water from we wouldn't have to only build a new treatment plant, but we don't have a line to bring the water over either. So that would be quite expensive. So if we could pull this off with just using the existing winter water flows, that would be terrific. So those would be my 2 favored runs to use up our other 2 runs. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you to everybody. I need to open up the floor for public comment. However, Georgina, at this time, I think we're seeing of the board members that have spoken, I think that we're seeing some convergences of ideas that hopefully are giving you direction. So I'd like to now come back to you, and perhaps if Sean needs to weigh in as well, where you feel this is directing you as some possible ideas without, again, having to call this as a formal vote and formal action.
I do think that we have a bit of work to decide which climate change to use. We've heard a few different viewpoints from board members here. And it sounds to me that no one said don't run a new climate projection. So it sounds like we're doing that. And, we have to make this decision in the next week, what we're going to do, because there isn't enough time to run. Like I said, it takes 36 hours to run each run. And so when it comes to the other project scenarios, I would recommend that we run the easiest one, which is the injection only, because it doesn't rely on surface water. It's a fixed amount, right, every single time. There's nothing really to do other than to look at the results and see, does just that, that's about 710 acre feet, what does that do to groundwater levels with the new climate? That will give us a good idea of the difference between the two climate scenario runs for that injection only. And that's really easy. There's no real work to do other than to run it. And I say it takes 36 hours, but that's a computer cranking on its own for a while. There's no one babysitting it. So I would like to do that to see what the delta is between those two climate change scenarios. And that would give us a good indication of whether we need to combine two projects or not, is how I would see it. And so then, maybe, yes, we do need to combine two, and maybe we don't. The injection only, if you remember the assumptions, we never take water out, which most people store water in the ground so that they can use it when they need it, when it's dry. So there's still the possibility that project could be expanded further down the line, so that more water could be stored when the demand increases and we can't keep, and climate changes and we can't keep up. That is a project that you can store water in the ground and take it out at some point. I don't know anyone that can really put inject water into the ground. It's very expensive, and just leave it there. You've got to get some other benefit from that amount of money that you're going to spend. So anyway, that's a little bit of an aside, but that's what I think. After hearing what people have provided, the commonalities are that new climate change and then this combined scenario. But I am just saying, let's wait off on that combined one until we see what the results are of injection only, which was kind of, very close to the in lieu benefits.
All right, let me go to the board then. Given what Georgina just described, first, does anybody have any questions or uncertain about what the implications are, what Georgina is describing? So let's first cover that, and then the next question I'm just going to see is, in a macro sense, is anybody opposed to that suggestion that Georgina has made? Let's go to Gail, please.
Yes, Georgina, I see your point, but I guess what I'm not sure that we'd get out of that is, for example, we won't be able to determine how much water we can take out of San Lorenzo Valley Water District creeks, because we won't have this new run of that calculation with the more favorable climate and rainfall. So we're losing some information. And so I guess, where do you think the water is going to come from? Well, maybe it doesn't matter, but it just seems to me that I would rather get a little bit more information out of a run than just simply saying we're just going to inject some water. But I'm not an expert at this modeling, so I defer to others.
And maybe I didn't describe that well enough, but because the impacts were very similar between in lieu and injection, to develop a new in lieu scenario, would take a lot more effort than the injection only, because the injection only is a fixed amount going in every time. I'm just saying it's like a proxy. It's a proxy for if we were still to inject the same amount of water. What was it? It was 710 or something both of them were very similar. One was 720 and one was 710, something like that. They're very similar amounts of water they have, and they appear to have very similar results. I'm just saying to use the injection as a proxy because we don't have to do any processing of data.
I fully understand that you're just using that as a proxy, and then you sort of proportionally move everything. But what I'm saying is that it would be nice to know how much water we can take out of the creeks that we can use for injection or in lieu, because all the models we have right now fail. And even we need to find out, like, what is our capacity to use the San Lorenzo Valley Water District winter flows to solve this problem. And so that's what I'm trying to get out of this by, yeah, that was what I meant.
Georgina, do you have the sensitivity in the system to get to where Gail is trying to get to?
No, we would have to process the climate change data to provide the runoff information we need to see how much was available. Like the same process that we did to develop the scenario you saw today.
So doable but difficult. I mean, where do you say?
Well, it's one of the two model scenarios that you would take up that to do that. And if we were going to do the combined, we would need to do that anyway. So the combined run of the in lieu within, you see, once you change climate change, you change a lot of things whenever it relies on surface water.
So Gail, with that further response, then does that adjust your thinking, your desires at all, or you?
Well, I suppose you could. It would, except that in the original in lieu, we were using the water from the reservoir, and so maybe if you could take that out in the one you did, that might be a compromise that I'd be happy with.
Okay.
That plausible, Virginia?
Yeah, no, I think that there is something that we can do. I've got to think about it a lot more and talk to the modelers about that. And also to Rick Rogers at San Lorenzo.
Okay, let's go to Jeff and then to Rosemary.
Okay, I have to, before I say what I'm going to say, need to ask a question first. So are you saying that if we don't make the big changes, then these 3 model runs or 2 model runs don't really count against the last 2 we have available? Or in any case, they count against the last 2 we have available? That's the question. Because I have another thing after that, after I get the answer.
I didn't understand that, Jeff. Sorry. It's getting late and my brain is fuzzy.
No, I understand. So I understand that it's less work to do the injection. And so then maybe it might not count as much against the last 2 that we have available to us.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay, so that makes it more palatable, because otherwise my feeling is that if we establish a baseline that we're going to write the report against, if we set the baseline that we have to have injection's a very expensive process, and we don't even have identified where that money is coming from, right? We have to spend a lot of money and get the water from somewhere, and then that's supposed to be, that's where we're baking that into our how we're writing our report. Whereas if we go with the in lieu, which is a little bit more work for you guys, maybe much more work for you guys, but potentially we save the cost of having to do injection, which is a huge cost, way more than I'm sure the consulting hours here we're talking about. So I'd rather see what can we achieve our goal with a nice goal, raising the Lompico up over time by getting it with some in lieu with a more nominal climate. I like the updated GFDL model. Then if that does it, if the in lieu actually has more water in it now without having to create any new treatment plants, and we're getting more water running out for Santa Cruz, so they're happier because there's more water coming out of the aquifer now. We're raising that Lompico back up over time. It's going to take time, but if we can achieve that, then that would be the run that would not have a lot of money involved and would be the baseline against what I want to measure everything else against that does cost a lot of money. That's my point. And it seems like that would be the one that should go into the plan, that we should build a GSP against, and then everything else is optional. If it doesn't reach our goals, then we have to put it into the plan. But if that reaches our goals, then we can just add stuff on after that to do better.
Georgina, is that resonating with you, what Jeff is saying, or not? Or do you need to think about it?
I need to think about it. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, let's go to Rosemary and then to Chris. And we need to start thinking about, we got to move on because there's still work that we still have to do tonight, the administrative items, and we're going to potentially have to think about a process solution here to the point that Georgina needs to think about some things. And she's also saying that we need to get some decisions made by next week, and we don't have a board meeting scheduled until another month from now, and those conditions do not align. So let's go to Rosemary and then to Chris, and then try to figure out how we're going to address this process-wise.
So I just want to mention something that I think has really become clear to the Santa Cruz folks as we've worked on our water rights EIR, and that is that there's a very delicate balance in the San Lorenzo between taking more water out and having impacts on fish. And fundamentally, the proposal that we're bringing forward to amend our water rights and looking at includes some potential water for ASR, some potential water for in lieu, those kinds of things. But looking at those volumes in a way that we have pretty much indicates that more water than what we're talking about taking out in terms of in lieu and our ongoing demand and building our drought storage is not available without impacting fish. So I just want to put that out there because there's been a lot of conversation in this meeting tonight about taking more winter water from San Lorenzo and putting it here and putting it there. And while I think these are all wonderful ideas, I just want to say it's a system, and there's a big piece of the system that we are not talking about here, and that is the impact on fish habitat. And I think I'm just putting it out there as something to have people begin to understand the system is much more dynamic and possibly constrained than we all think it is. That's it. Okay,
and we've seen, I mean, Sierra alluded to that earlier in her response, and those of us that track what's going on pretty closely in Sigma and other places, and even hearkening back to the alternative plans a couple of years ago, we've seen the natural resource trustee agencies going there, right? They're playing their cards in response to alternative plans and GSPs. So there needs to be a legitimate concern there. Chris, go ahead, please.
Also, I just want to sort of remind everyone that, we're not deciding for sure, even if we write the report based on a project scenario, that's not a commitment to do that project or spend any money. That is always something that is flexible as time goes on, as we see how things develop. Just so we know we're not locking ourselves into something just because it's in our GSP. We are saying, here's a way we can make this all happen. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Chris.
Okay, just so everyone knows, it's not like a drop dead, we made a decision, and oh my God, we got to live with it.
No, I mean, I think it's probably as much a financial consideration as anything, because there's finite resources and there's a contract that exists with what Montgomery's supposed to spend.
Not just in general, I'm just talking, just so everyone understands theoretically, the whole GSP process and these decisions on projects that we're making are not written in stone. Yeah. They get our GSP done, and then we go on as an agency and still make decisions and decide what we do.
That is exactly the case. We've talked about that before. Being fully embedded into Sigma is adaptive management. That's why it has the 5-year period of time update. You just got to be defensible coming across the first finish line, and then you get the ball rolling on how you iterate. The risk is you need to be defensible from the get-go. Let's go to Jack. Jack, you're muted, I believe.
Yep, sorry about that. To expand on Chris's question, if we haven't decided exactly which plan by the time we need to get this, the plan together by, say, July, could we have 3 options in there and say we're still exploring which one works for us, whether that's because we still need more information or whatever? Is that feasible? Could we be at that point? And I'm asking partly because for Scotts Valley, we're looking at, as a city and owner of the wastewater treatment plant, we're looking at our own studies, trying to determine what works for the city. And so we may not be able to fully weigh in. We're trying. We want to weigh in as quickly as we can. But my question is, could the plan actually say, hey, we're still looking at 2 or 3 options to address this?
Yeah, but you have to show what, I don't know, maybe if I back off a bit and say in the GSP, what you have to show is that that there are possibilities to raise groundwater levels, because that's what we need to do in this basin, right? We want to raise groundwater levels above where they have been historically. And how much we do that, we don't know. It depends on how big a project that you put in there. You know, what we might have in there is we need this amount of water. We don't have to say where it's coming from or how it's getting there, but this is the amount of water we need. This is the best way to get it into the aquifers that need it the most. That kind of level is fine. We don't have to give a name to these or say exactly where every drop is coming from. But DWR knows that that is not possible in this short period of time.
Okay.
You know, so I think, you know, that's really what I'm aiming to do with these scenarios, is look at what is the best bang for buck and how can we raise groundwater levels and what volume do we need to do that, and how, you know, once we give you the information, if you have 1,000 acre feet at this cost, this is the impact it's going to have on the basin. We may decide, whoa, we need to, you know, the measurable objectives need to be maybe a little lower or a little higher. I don't know, you know, that's all related to what we think is manageable and people can afford in this basin.
Okay, that makes sense, but just to make sure we're on the same page. So I get the part about saying we want to raise the water table X feet or whatever. But if we're not sure of exactly which, you know, PMA we're going to use, could we have, you know, more than one PMA, more than one way to get there while we decide, you know, which one works?
Yeah, so that list that Sierra spoke about earlier of all those projects, if you remember that big table, there's lots of projects in there, different ways to go about it. And if it doesn't include the project you're thinking about, you should get that in there.
Oh, it does. My question is, I'm just not sure, you know, from my perspective, which, you know, PMAs are going to work yet. The city in Scotts Valley is still trying to gather some information that will help in that decision from the city side. Okay. And as one participant in this process. So my question is just, could the plan say, hey, our plan is to, you know, to reach the goals of X, Y, and Z, but we're not sure exactly which method we're going to use to get there yet.
Yeah, but we do have to show through modeling that there is a path to getting there.
Right.
We can have you know, yes, we can have a few projects and say these are all possibilities, yes. Okay. And that's why we're having these different scenarios, right?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
We're not looking for the ultimate one at this point. We can't do that.
And I get that, and we'll have to change, as I understand it, over time, because we'll get more information. But at some point, we need to decide which project we're going to proceed on. So it sounds like we need to do the best job we can to collectively to get to what our preferred methodology is, but we may need to define some of that later, more precisely.
You got it.
Thank you.
Dave, I think you might be muted.
Yeah, I am sorry. My cat was yelling and screaming at me. Didn't think y'all wanted to hear that. Okay, I want to cover some process items here. We have a circumstance where we have a number of board members that have provided some very meaningful feedback. We've got some ideas that Georgina is already thinking about and needs to think about further, and has indicated that she needs to think about. So obviously we can't get a rationale or conclusion tonight. Perrette, Georgina, the flip side to this is that I don't know where you all are at from a project management perspective about I assume that Montgomery does not feel that it is vested with authority to just sort of go off unilaterally and make its own decisions as a consultant as to how to spend the money. I mean, we did not anticipate this circumstance. Clearly, it's occupied a lot of time tonight, but that was the point of tonight's conversation, to have to roll out to you all that the circumstance was not anticipated, but it is what we faced. We had to have this discussion. Now we have to have a new approach. So we either need to decide that this needs to be a reconvening of the board to give a green light to a suggestion, a more formalized suggestion that Georgina has to take some time to think about, or we need the board to say we're vesting that responsibility to our project manager and program manager, which is Perrette, to direct the consultant on what to do next based upon what the consultant thinks is the best step. So it's either got to be a kind of a decision at the project management level, or it's got to be a decision sometime in the next week by the board, which means there needs to be a convening of the board in a manner that is consistent with the Brown Act, both in terms of time required to post the notice for an agenda and all the other sort of things. So I don't know where we go process wise here. I just know that Georgina has said in order to stay on the time frame, she's got to do some thinking, and then she's got to get an answer one way or another within the next week in order to stay on the timeline. So where do we go process wise from here? Perrette, thoughts?
I would maybe put out there the suggestion that Georgina had. I think it's a pretty strong one. And we got some comments to that, and then we got some counter comments. And so maybe if people now have all of this information, if they would agree to go with the updated GFDL model or something similar that is suggested by Sean and the team, and then run the in lieu current in lieu project that would be a kind of representative or placeholder. I think it's a good starting point. Gives us some sense. It might not still do the trick, and we might come back next time and see we are still not making much improvement, and then we can decide next time, do we need to now double up and start having meetings every 2 weeks, or do we need to add something, or can we live with what the outcome of that is?
So Georgina, I want you to go back, given some of the feedback that has further come out, the questions from Gail, other comments. I want you to restate the suggestion you have, or maybe even with a couple of amendments if some others have come to your mind. And then I want to come back to what I'd said earlier, which is I want to double back around along the lines of what Perrette had just said, which is there anybody opposed? And again, nobody's obligated to agree with what Georgina's putting out there, but I'm just trying to thread this needle. So Georgina, go ahead and put your proposal out again for everybody to ground truth in their heads.
Okay, no, I got to back up to what Perrette just said. Perrette, did you say the in lieu or did you say the injection?
Oh, I'm sorry, injection, yes.
Okay.
So if I said in lieu, I take that back, injection.
Okay, so, you know, funny enough, the easiest part of this is going to be the climate, figuring out the climate part. I do have to look to see, you know, take into consideration Gail's concerns there. I can't do that on the fly here right now, but yeah, I don't know what else to say, but I do have to take a look at that and see is there an easy way that we can do it, or we have to do a whole new run. But, you know, thinking about what the city has said about some of their restrictions of flow, those are definitely, they were part, like Sean said, the flows were part of the climate change that we did use. If we use the new climate change as a whole set of of data that we have to generate to figure out, is there enough water to access winter water, and does it then meet the bypass flow requirements of the city? So you know, I have to talk to a few people to figure out how much time that's going to take. You know, these things can all be going on parallel next week, figuring this stuff out. And
but I'm just saying, I want you to restate your, like I said, your proposal that you made earlier, as well as if there's any friendly amendments that you're wanting to make to it based upon some other feedback from the board members. Because the next thing I have to do is then have you restate it. There's been a lot of conversation back and forth. And without calling a formal vote, I need to then check in with the board and say, is anybody opposed to what Georgina just has proposed?
Okay. We're going to look at a new climate change scenario. We run that as the new baseline. We'll look at trying to use something, a proxy like the injection, to look at, does just one project have the desired results that we're looking for, or do we need to combine? And that's where we would make that decision if we need to combine projects.
Okay. Jeff, you have a comment, and then we have Frank Cheap, who's got a public comment, and I need to get to both of those before I sort of unofficially call this question, so that you have the latitude as board members to hear feedback from a member of the public. So Jeff, let's go to your comment, and then let's go to Jeff's, or just go to Frank's question, and then I want to circle back around to this. Is anybody opposed?
So with the updated GFDL model, I think we can presume that we're going to have more precipitation. So I think we can feel comfortable that we're going to get the same amount of rainfall as we got in the previous one, at least, probably more, but obviously more. But I would be comfortable with you just assuming that we could only get the amount that you put in the previous one, so you don't have to recalculate all of the stream flows in order to run that, and just run it that way. And then it'd run as easy as the injection that way, because you don't have to recalculate all the stream flow surface water stuff, and just use that, and then just go to the updated GFDL, use the in lieu, and you get the same results. It's much simpler like the injection one, but you have a place that you know where you're getting the water from, right?
Okay, Frank, let's go to you for public comment, and then see if there are any other public comments. Nick, for you to open up the phone lines, and then I'm going to double back around everybody. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Super quick. Injection is taking purified water, pumping it into a well under high pressure. Is that right, Georgina? Muted.
You repeat that, sorry.
Injection is taking pure water, purified water.
Yes.
Not recycled, drinkable.
Well, no, it's recycled. It's advanced treated wastewater. Yes.
Potable water. Would that be the stuff that comes out of Scotts Valley Recycling Plant, or of higher quality?
No, it's wastewater that is highly treated, and
like SoCal is doing right now, or planning
correct.
to do. Okay.
Yes.
So that's expensive water in the first place. We're gonna take this treated water, pump it into the ground under high pressure with electric pumps and electricity and all that stuff. You mentioned it's expensive. I mean, what does the cost model look like? Is there any notion of what that is?
Yeah, there are some, the Scotts Valley Water District has done some studies to look into that. And I don't know the numbers offhand. Barrett, maybe you want to.
I can add them, but I'm just trying to also keep my eye on the clock. And we're not really talking about necessarily what water we're injecting. I think at this phase, we are trying to just balance the future water budget with amounts of water. If we take 700 of any kinds of water, it could be surface water that is treated and injected, but never pumped out. It would give us the same result. So I think at this point, it's the location and it's the volume of water, and it's when it's put in there. Is it year round or is it 6 months? So I think this is the exercise we are doing at this point. We should not get too wrapped up around what specific project and how much it's going to cost. That's going to come as a next round.
Well, if it's being considered an option, I mean, to run a study on it or modify a study to understand the cost benefit or the benefit to the water bank, the water table, I think somebody should just bring up or be able to discuss in reasonable terms what the costs are. I mean, I think it's a
They
fair
all part of
question.
the
And
CRSP.
the data should exist out there, what it costs.
They're coming
Right.
back next in March. Yeah, all of those
Yeah,
costs.
and that's actually coming, Frank. They're understanding your concern. That actually is coming.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. All right, thank you. Nick, let's go ahead and see if there are any other members of the public that would like to comment.
As of right, yeah, it looks like in terms of callers, I'm not seeing any callers. This one's just going to be rote chat. The only folks we have calling in that I'm tracking right now are actual board members. And who are minutes and yeah.
Okay, we have Tom Berg from DWR who would like to make a comment. So Tom, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for your guys' time. I know Georgina mentioned I was here attending and I am listening to you guys and you're putting forth great effort. I can't tell you from my position what's acceptable coming forth in your GSP. So unfortunately, I can't lend anything to clarify, say, yep, that's a great idea, go with it. However, I was listening previously to Sierra Ryan and how she had some feelings about what aspects of the projects were working well, and she seemed to portray really good advice on to how to get through these steps. So I can say that you guys, the first step is you need to find common ground and provide a product that's complete. So you have a complete GSP by the time the deadline hits, and it's an appropriate document to be submitted by a professional. And after that, whether it's accepted or not by DWR, I can't comment on, but because it'll be a 2-year review. Like I said, Sierra Ryan seemed to have a really good understanding of what the work product should represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with the very significant conversation that's gone on, I'm now posing the question: is any member of the board opposed? Well, actually, I'm going to put a friendly amendment. Georgina, is it in the realm of possibilities that upon your thinking through this a little bit, you can document just so that board members sort of know where you land on things in terms of what's going to happen next, not for the purposes of any kind of serial meeting type approval, but just that there's a memo or something that can get sent out so the board knows where things are at? Perrette, you're shaking your head now. No. Okay.
Terry's gonna shake her head too. We can provide it, but we have to make it publicly available for everybody.
No, I didn't mean not publicly available. I'm just saying so that it doesn't go into a black hole. That wherever it is that Georgina, I mean, Georgina's getting some feedback tonight, and she's going to probably need to think about some of the nuances. I just didn't know if there was a way of Montgomery coming back and just, okay, never mind. Georgina, okay, with all that aside, then, is anybody opposed to the proposal that Georgina has put forward to you all as a next step? Anybody opposed? This is not a formal vote. I'm just checking to see from a straw poll perspective, is anybody opposed? Gail, go ahead, please. Gail, are you saying?
Just raising my hand to say I was opposed.
Oh, you are opposed?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the record's going to show that Gail is opposed. We're not doing this by a consensus vote at this point, so Perrette, I think we're going to have to double back around to Gail and reconcile how we're going to deal with that. You know,
Dave, you don't have to deal with me. You just asked for people to put their votes on.
No, I know, but I mean, the board functions under a goal to try to reach consensus on things, and then this is one of those times we may not get there. But I wanted to be honoring the fact that you're saying that you're opposed, and I get that, and giving Georgina some guidance. So the record needs to show that Gail has stated what she stated, which she does not approve of this idea. Okay, Georgina, do you have what you need to move ahead?
Yes, I do. I'll be working in the next week with a number of people, and I don't know. We'll figure out something, because we do need to keep going forward. So that's my main thing. I can't stall. So I have to figure out something that fits within the Brown Act and all of that. But we got some great people here the different agencies, and I know we can sort that out.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and for your commitment to this conversation. I know it was not expected, but it was necessary nonetheless. With that, I'm going to recommend that we close out this portion of the meeting, and I am going to hand it back to Director Perry to take on the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thanks very much, Dave. So we go to 2.2, which is annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 and 2019. Can I get any staff report that we need, please?
We do have the treasurer here. Stephanie, I see you there. So if you would like to do just a very quick round, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, so everyone has the audit report. I really appreciate some of the board members' time in reviewing it. We did get some feedback. You know, we were able to find some different little clerical errors that the auditors are going to go ahead and implement into it. So I really appreciate everyone's input with that. We are obviously very small. There are a very limited number of transactions. So from the auditor side, I mean, we are a relatively easy audit for them to perform. If anyone has any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer any. Is that it?
Okay, all right, no other questions? Anything from the public? Anything from board members? I assume everyone looked at it? Okay, Nick, do you want to just, there's no one, is everyone who's on the phone from the board?
That is correct, yes. And basically everybody who's here from the board on the phone is going to be an alternate.
Okay, great. So 2.3, monitoring and not.
Director Perry, I believe we do need a motion to accept the audit.
Oh, sorry. I get a motion to accept the audit, please.
So moved, Director Koenig.
Okay, thank you. And
second.
Doug? Okay, Eden, I believe Eden seconded, and Manu made the motion. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Director Koenig, Director Cassidy seconding to accept the annual financial. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Mayhood.
Aye.
Director Smoley.
Aye.
Director Stiles. You there, Ruth?
I think she said aye. Your mouth is moving.
Okay, and Director Perry.
Aye.
All right, 11 out of 11, motion passes unanimously.
Okay. The 2.3, monitoring and data management fund agreement.
Okay, you would like me to go first? We do have Sarah here. It's pretty straightforward. There's two contracts that the county is executing. And a big portion of those contracts is benefiting the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency, but there are other partners. So it's an agreement with the county to pay our cost share of those two contracts. And one is with a Balance Hydrology, and the other one is with Kisters for data management systems. So that's the very brief. If any questions from the board, I think Sarah is better suited to answer those.
Okay. Hearing none.
I think there's one from Doug and then from Jeff.
Okay. I didn't see that.
Yep. So Doug, could you go
Sorry,
first?
Chris. Quick like a bunny. Two questions. Number one, how are the relative shares calculated? And that is our share versus these other partner agencies, number one. And then number two, I'm curious about the work product that we're going to get out of, I guess it's Kisters,
Yep.
North America. Are we going to get a working system that we can operate, or are we going to be leasing something in a SaaS type model with ongoing costs? Thank you.
Okay, great questions. Sarah, do you want to take them?
He's muted. Sierra, are you there? And I wouldn't blame you if you fell asleep.
No camera, no microphone. I don't think she's there right now.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to go. I'm just kind of speaking from what I've worked with her. The second question first, Kisters. It's an data management system that is we have a license that we. So this cost is just to develop the system. So upfront cost. Then going forward, we will have to decide how many licenses we want. It's a cloud-based system. And we are going to be keeping all of our data that is required by the GSP in that database. And then we have access to that. We have to do data input. County is going to be the main one hosting it, and it is to be determined in the future how many extra licenses and what level access different agencies and individuals will have.
And there's
Sarah.
I'm sorry, I had a toddler emergency.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I'm here now. I'm ready to talk.
Sarah, could you speak to the balance contract, how the distribution, the cost share was determined?
Yes. You want the monitoring network stuff first. The cost for the monitoring was determined based on a large amount of work that we've been having Balanced Hydrologics do with the county, with the San Lorenzo Valley Water District, and more recently with the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency over the past several years. And it's a continuation of that work. The total budget for the monitoring that they're doing for the county and the agency was $190,000, and that involved some grant-funded costs, some costs that were associated with the GSA, and then some costs related to work that is ongoing gauging and monitoring that the county has been hosting for many years. And so the way the cost was allocated was based, $90,000 of it is based on grant funded work that is required under our contract with the state. 40,000 of it, sorry, I didn't have the numbers right in front of me, but the $40,000 of it is money that was coming from the county, and then the remaining money was coming from the groundwater agency, and it was already approved in the groundwater agency's budget. So that's the explanation.
Does that answer your question? Did I get it?
Yeah, I think I followed all that. Coming back around to the software, since I know that we're a little better than maybe some of the budget split stuff on the others. So it sounds to me like we are going to end up with some ongoing costs here that are at this point indeterminate in terms of the number of licenses that we're going to have to deploy for our agency. And do we have any idea the magnitude of that? I'll call it an annual fee that we'll be paying.
Yeah, the licenses cost about $10,000 per year, and we probably need one or two for this agency. And that includes some degree of hosting and things. We actually have our first kickoff meeting next week or the following week, an 8-hour over 2 days session where we're going to be working out a lot of these issues. So I'll have a lot more information for you about what this is going to look like in the ongoing work and costs, what they will look like at the next meeting.
All right, thanks.
And we have Jeff Koopman next.
Yeah, I got a couple comments. I'd like to know more about this. I mean, it seems like it basically makes sense, but I don't have a lot of detail on it. And it seems like it's one of the larger budget items that us as a board has to face this year. And yet we have very little information in front of us about it. I mean, very little compared to how important this is as being a big chunk of this year's budget. On top of that, there are several new directors here tonight who are just, brand new to this whole process and haven't had a chance to review this. And I just was wondering, is it really critical that this vote has to happen tonight, or could this, be delayed by one board meeting and let's give some opportunity to give a little bit more information on it and a little more detail out to the directors so anyone who's interested could study it a little further before we give a thumbs up on several $100,000 worth of our agency's expenditures that we are not so clear on.
Well, most of this is directly coming from the grant contracts, and those, I believe you have seen the grant language. So both the data management and the Santa Margarita monitoring, they're all in the budgets that you've already approved.
And it's grant money for the most part.
Right.
90,000 was grant, or is it?
Or match.
So,
we do have to come up with a match also. So both of those items have been running. The timing of that, yes, they are in this year's budget, but they are not annual. This is not an annual contract. This is for the extension of the work that is still left to be done. So both of those, I believe, well, certainly the balance work is going to be over the remaining 2 years, 2.5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. These are the costs to gather the data we need to write the plan and to develop the monitoring network that is required as part of this process, and then the data management system, which is also required. The heavy costs are upfront because this is us doing the development, but that is all part of our grant, our large grant process. So it's not entirely coming from the agencies.
So the grant was targeted specifically at these tasks, is what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I would just observe, following up on that, this was a key topic during the whole process of interviewing consultants and setting the original budget, however many years ago that was. So just by way of background for some of the new directors, this was looked at pretty closely early on, just as a key deliverable of the whole process.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments?
There's none in chat.
Okay. Can I get a motion on this?
I move that we approve and authorize Director Cassidy.
Okay. Can I get a second?
Second, Doug.
Okay. Can I get a roll call vote?
You absolutely can. Again, this is a motion to approve and authorize the staff agency to execute an agreement with the County of Santa Cruz for data management services not to exceed $204,500. Roll call vote. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Abstain, is that okay?
Yep. Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Yes.
Director Mayhood.
Yes.
Director Smoley.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
All right, we have 10 out of 11, one abstain. Motion passes.
Okay. 2.4, public official bond for our treasurer. Gonna get bonded.
Yeah, so this came out of last board meeting action item where the board, I think it was last, maybe 2 times ago now, where the board approved second amended bylaws, and now we have a clause there to obtain an official bond, and it is pursuant to government code, and the same government code also prescribes that the governing body must establish the amount. And so the staff, along with a legal counsel, we did some research, some comparables, and we determined that considering the cash reserves, amount of cash reserves and our size of the budget, 50,000 would be appropriate amount. We would be utilizing Aqua JPIA and the company they work with, and we have received a estimation that this would be about $200 an annual expense.
Director Cassidy moves that we spend $200 on an annual bond.
Okay.
A second.
Seconded.
Okay, Koopman second that. Okay, do I have a roll call vote? Cassidy.
Cassidy and Koopman to establish an amount of public bond treasurer agency, not a $50,000 cap. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Mayhood.
Aye.
Director Smoley.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
11 out of 11, motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we have the consent agenda. Can I have a motion? Director
I
Cassidy.
move we
Cassidy
approve the
moves.
consent agenda.
I think Director Cassidy wins again, and then we'll give Ruth
I'll
the
second.
We'll get Cassidy and Stiles.
The term highly motivated comes to mind. All right, Cassidy Stiles to approve the consent agenda. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Abstain.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Mayhood.
Aye.
Director Smoley.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
Motion passes 10 out of 11, one abstention.
Just an observation, Cassidy and Stiles sounds like a folk duo from the 60s. Okay. Can we get we have election of officers for the next year upcoming. We, chairperson, vice chair, and secretary. I don't think I mean, I guess treasurer also, but we're going to keep our treasurer, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so do I hear a motion?
I think nominations maybe, what we need.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Bruce McPherson. I'd like to nominate, I think we're on our last lap. I'd like to see Mr. Perry continue as chair, and I think it's good that we have representation from San Jose Valley, so I'd like to recommend Mahood for vice chair.
Okay. Okay, we don't, it's a nomination.
I'm gonna ask Terry, can they do it all as one vote and have all officers as part of one motion and one vote? Or would you like them separately?
Does it need to be seconded?
Well, I think we also need a secretary because Angela Franklin used to have that role, and she has resigned. So we do need a nomination for secretary too.
I think we should do them separately.
Oh, roll call for each of them separately?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. We
That
get
is-
the country duo going again.
That's consistent with precedent as well. We are going to need a second for those motions, though.
Well, I was thinking that if we can do all three, we need a third nomination, but then we can go either way. We can look for second for those two and then go and do secretary.
I'll second both
I
of
would
those
like to
nominations. This is Engfer.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we
get a roll call vote.
Well, separately for
Right.
chair and vice chair. Yep.
All right, so this roll call vote's going to be for the chair for 2021. I have McPherson and Engfer for Perry for board chair. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Aye.
Director Mayhood.
Aye.
Director Smalley.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director, Director Perry.
Sure.
11, motion passes. Congratulations, Chair Perry. You're up for another year. Here I have McPherson and Engfer nominating Gail Mayhood from San Lorenzo Valley for Vice Chair for SMGWA for 2021. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Enthusiastic aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Yes.
Director Mayhood.
Why not?
Director Smalley.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
All right, 11 out of 11, motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Ms. Mayhood. You are now the Vice Chair of SMGWA. Still need one for Secretary.
Okay, we need a victim.
This is a very easy position.
Somebody throw their hat in the ring. How about Jack, you want to do it? Who wants to do it? Anybody? Come on.
I would do it.
Okay, I'll nominate Jack Dillis.
I second
I'll
it.
second.
Okay, I think Gail,
Lucy,
we'll give
I'll second
Gail
that.
the second. Me and Gail.
Gotcha. All right, this for the position of Secretary for 2021. We have a nomination for Director Dillis. Director Engfer.
Aye.
Director Koenig.
Aye.
Director McPherson.
Aye.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Director Koopman.
Aye.
Director Pollock.
Aye.
Director Dillis.
Yes.
Director Mayhood.
Aye.
Director Smalley.
Aye.
Director Stiles.
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
All right, 11 out of 11, motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Director Dillis. You are now the SMGWA Secretary for 2021.
Okay, well done. All right, thank you. So let's go down to, you still the staff reports that are there. They're for your reading pleasure. I don't think we need to take any action, do we? No? Okay.
No, just if there's any questions. There is
Yeah.
one from Doug Engfrom.
Okay, Doug.
Thought you were going to get away with it.
Yeah, I did.
On the communications report, assuming either Bill or Jennifer are here, curious about how we're measuring engagement with the work we're doing out there on social media and via email, and whether we can see any of those results.
I can bring it back. I know Jennifer was attending at the beginning, but she could not stay for the whole time. So I will bring that question to her and then back to the board next time.
Okay. Terry, do you have anything oral to give for your legal counsel update? She's shaking.
Nothing.
Okay. Individual directors report. I will start off and just say, I really think we're going to need some extra meetings. I think it's just a reality going forward. We have some excellent new board members that have more to contribute, and maybe even something to contribute on things that have occurred before they came on. And I think we owe it to them to spend a little time, extra board time. And I think it'll be constructive for just the entire cohesiveness of the group. So I just reporting that and not asking, obviously we're not making any decisions, but I think that's one important aspect of some extra meetings is for our new people and to get them to make some contributions to what we're doing. Anyone else, any other director like to give a report? We can just jump in there.
Yeah, I have a request up there. This is Jeff Koopman. So I understand this is the opportunity in the meeting where a director can request, let's see, how's that worded? I don't have it in front of me. Hold on, I got it here. It's an opportunity for me as a member to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. If I understand correctly, this is the opportunity for that.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to basically, make any comments, tell us about what you're doing, and you can suggest. Yeah, this is free time.
Okay, I didn't know it was free time. Well, I mean, we only have it's 5 board meetings approximately left or something like that, which is not enough time. Obviously, it's the elephant in the room or something. And we've thrown out there a few times we could double up on board meetings, and I am in favor of that if that's what needs to happen, so that everybody can be a party to the whole process. But obviously, we're not making enough headway fast enough, so we need to have more going on to get things ironed out. And there's a lot of things that we need to do. So one option is that we, as a board, decide to meet more frequently, or there's been feedback from the board before that they're not as interested in getting together more, possibly. And so the other request would be to explore the idea of possibly like an ad hoc committee, maybe with representatives from Santa Cruz, San Lorenzo Valley, Scotts Valley, and maybe an independent well owner, to get together with staff as needed and try and work through some of these different things that we're arm wrestling over in these meetings, and try and get things moved forward a little bit in terms of negotiations. With only 5 meetings left, it's going to be hard to happen in those 5 board meetings. So either we add 5 more board meetings or such, or we maybe create a committee to address this issue, and try and have that help us out. So the idea would be that we put this on the agenda, that we discuss this in our next meeting. How are we going to get more done quicker so that we can reach the end of this?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think we can do that. Okay. Anyone else have a report of any kind you want to give?
I'd like to just ask, I think it's really wonderful that we've had Angela with us for so long, since the very beginning. Wonder if there's some way we can acknowledge her contributions. Normally we do a card, everybody sign it. Is there an email card or something we could do? Correct, you want to do something?
Sure, I'll look into that. Yes, I'll take it on.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Manu, anyone? I saw
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, this is Manu Koenig. I just wanted to thank Mr. Sipos for he actually did give me a significant amount of background information earlier today on the activities of the agency and the background. So I just want to thank him. I do feel pretty up to speed, and I'm happy to continue to educate myself in my own time, and hope that the board doesn't feel the need to take any extra time on my behalf.
Okay, thank you. Gail, you turned your mic on. Do you want to say anything? No? Okay. All right. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Board compliance. I feel compliant.
Quick administrative comment on that. Just want to bring it up real brief. It is Form 700 season. Form 700s are due every year on the 1st of April. Just want to put that on everybody's radar. You should have gotten an email from NetFile. If you haven't gotten an email from NetFile, go ahead and reach out to me. If you have any questions about this stuff, reach out to me or your organization's clerk if you're in one of the districts. More to that come. I'll keep beating you guys up about it in February.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And that takes us through a bunch of things. And you can see, I don't think I need to go over all the future items. Got a letter from Nick. I hear him loud and clear. Okay, events calendar. We got the Groundwater Resources Association. Any conferences anyone wants to do? That takes us to item 10. It's 9:29.
Cassidy and Styles move to adjourn.
Yes. The great hit. Move to adjourn. All right. Thank you, everybody. That was an amazing evening. Good job. Looking forward to getting this thing done. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.